Hello everyone, I am Mano Scaling, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me where you are from and what time you are watching. Now get comfortable and relax. We should have never gone to Gifford Pinchot Forest. I'm Derek Spencer, I was 31 back then, and this is the story of how I lost everything. Sarah and I had been planning this RV trip for months. 3 years together, and I was finally ready to propose. The ring sat hidden in my sock drawer for weeks while we mapped out our route through Washington's most remote wilderness areas. She'd always talked about disconnecting completely, finding somewhere the cell towers couldn't reach us, where we could just be together without the constant buzz of modern life. Gifford Pinchot seemed perfect. 1 million acres of old-growth forest, mountain lakes, and trails that stretched for days without seeing another soul. The kind of place where you could disappear entirely from the world if you wanted to. If only I'd known how literally that would prove to be. We left Seattle on a Friday morning in October, our rented 30-foot Winnebago packed with enough food and supplies for a week. Sarah wore her favorite hiking boots and that ridiculous knit cap with the pom-pom that made her look like a woodland sprite. She was practically bouncing in the passenger seat as we headed south on I-5, her excitement infectious. "This is going to be perfect," she kept saying, scrolling through photos of secluded campsites on her phone. "Look at this one. Elk Lake. No cell service, no other campers within miles. Just us and the wilderness." I should have paid more attention to that no cell service part. The first sign something was off came about an hour after we turned onto Forest Service Road 25. Our GPS, a brand new Garmin we'd bought specifically for the trip, started acting erratic. The screen would flicker, showing our location jumping between different coordinates, sometimes placing us miles from where we actually were. "That's weird," Sarah said, tapping the screen. "It shows us driving through a lake." I laughed it off. Mountains mess with the signal. Good thing we have paper maps as backup. But when we consulted the topographical map, things got stranger. The road we were on, clearly marked as FS25 on every sign we'd passed, didn't seem to exist on our map. Not in the location where we clearly were, anyway. "Maybe it's an old map," Sarah suggested, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. We'd been driving for 3 hours on increasingly narrow forest roads when we encountered our first local. An ancient pickup truck sat parked at a wide spot where our road intersected with what looked like a hunting trail. The driver, a weathered man in his 70s wearing a faded flannel shirt, watched us approach with pale, rheumy eyes. I pulled up beside him and rolled down my window. "Excuse me, sir. We're trying to get to Elk Lake. Are we heading the right way?" The old man studied us for a long moment, his gaze shifting from my face to Sarah's, then to our RV behind us. Something flickered across his features. Was it pity? Fear? "Elk Lake," he repeated slowly, as if the words tasted strange in his mouth. "You folks sure that's where you want to be going?" "Well, yes, we have a reservation at the campground there." He shook his head slowly. "Ain't no reservations at Elk Lake, son. Ain't been anyone camping there for, 15 years now. Maybe more." Sarah leaned across me toward the window. The Forest Service website said, "Website's wrong," the old man cut her off. "Forest Service don't manage that area anymore. Hasn't for a long time." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "You'd be better off turning back. There's a nice campground about 20 miles south. Eagle Falls. Got facilities, other campers. Safe." That word, safe, hung in the air between us like a warning. "What's not safe about Elk Lake?" I asked. The old man's mouth tightened into a thin line. "Just things happen up there. People get turned around, lost. Sometimes." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Just trust me, son. Go to Eagle Falls instead." But Sarah and I had driven 4 hours to reach this specific spot. We had our hearts set on complete isolation, and Eagle Falls sounded like exactly the opposite of what we wanted. After the old man drove away, shaking his head as he went, we debated briefly before deciding to press on. "He's probably just one of those locals who doesn't like outsiders," Sarah said. "You know how some people get about their secret spots." I wanted to believe her, God, how I wanted to believe her. The road to Elk Lake wound through increasingly dense forest. Douglas fir and western hemlock towered above us, their canopy so thick that even at midday we drove through a green-tinged twilight. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as we climbed higher into the mountains. Our GPS had given up entirely by this point, just showing a blank gray screen with an error message about being unable to locate satellites. Even our phones showed no signal, not even emergency service. We were completely cut off from the outside world. But the isolation felt romantic rather than threatening. Sarah reached over and took my hand as we drove, her fingers warm against mine. This was what we'd come for, just the two of us, surrounded by ancient wilderness, far from the complications of modern life. Elk Lake appeared suddenly as we crested a small rise. The road curved around a stand of massive cedar trees, and there it was. A pristine alpine lake perhaps a quarter-mile across, its surface like black glass reflecting the darkening sky above. The water was so still it looked solid, like obsidian polished to a mirror finish. "Derek?" Sarah breathed, pressing her face to the passenger window. "It's beautiful." She was right. It was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen. Also, the most silent. No birds called from the trees. No insects buzzed. Even the wind seemed to avoid this place, leaving the forest utterly, completely quiet. The campground, such as it was, consisted of a small clearing near the lake's edge with a single fire ring and a weathered picnic table. No facilities, no other campers, no sign of recent human activity. If not for the fire ring and table, I'd have assumed we were the first people to ever set foot here. We spent the rest of daylight setting up camp. The RV's generator hummed reassuringly as we leveled it and extended the slide-outs. Sarah insisted on making dinner outside at the picnic table, even though the temperature continued to drop as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. "This is perfect," she said, spooning chili from our camp stove into 2 bowls. "Just listen to that silence." I listened, and the silence was indeed profound. But there was something about it that made me uneasy. It felt wrong somehow. Not the natural quiet of a peaceful wilderness area, but rather the tense, expectant hush that falls over a forest just before a predator strikes. "Maybe we should eat inside," I suggested. "It's getting cold." "Don't be such a city boy," Sarah teased, but I noticed she pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. We were halfway through dinner when we heard the first sound that wasn't our own voices or the gentle hum of our generator. It came from across the lake. A low, mournful call that might have been a loon, if loons lived at this altitude, which they don't. Sarah paused with her spoon halfway to her mouth. What was that? The call came again, longer this time, and definitely not a loon. It rose and fell with an almost human quality, like someone calling out across a great distance. But the words, if they were words, were unintelligible. "Probably just an owl," I said, though I'd never heard an owl make a sound like that. We finished eating in relative quiet, both of us listening for the strange call to repeat. It didn't, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the darkness beyond our small circle of generator-powered light. Inside the RV, with the door locked and curtains drawn, the unease faded somewhat. Sarah curled up against me on the small couch, her head on my shoulder as we played cards and talked about our plans for the next day. We'd brought hiking boots and planned to explore some of the trails marked on our topographical map. Maybe find a good spot for what I hoped would be a very special moment. The ring was in my jacket pocket, the one hanging by the door. I'd been carrying it for 3 days, waiting for the perfect moment. Tomorrow, I thought. Somewhere beautiful and private, I'd get down on one knee and ask Sarah to spend her life with me. We went to bed around 10, exhausted from the long drive and mountain air. Sarah fell asleep almost immediately, her breathing deep and regular beside me in the RV's small bedroom. But I lay awake, listening to the profound silence outside. It was too silent. Even in the most remote wilderness areas, there's always some sound. Wind in the trees, the distant call of a night bird, the scurrying of small animals. But here, The quiet was so complete it seemed to press against the RV's walls like a living thing. I must have dozed off eventually because I was awakened sometime later by voices outside. At first, I thought other campers had arrived. The voices were too distant and muffled to make out words, but they had the cadence of casual conversation. A man and woman, maybe, talking quietly beside their campfire. But as I became more fully awake, I realized several troubling things about these voices. First, they seemed to be coming from the direction of the lake rather than from the road. Second, there had been no sound of an arriving vehicle. And third, as I listened more carefully, I began to recognize the voices. They were ours, Sarah's and mine. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. The conversation outside continued. Two people who sounded exactly like us, discussing something in voices too low for me to understand. But every inflection, every laugh, every pause was perfectly familiar. Beside me, Sarah slept peacefully, her breathing unchanged. I looked at the clock on my phone. 3:06 a.m. Moving as carefully as possible to avoid waking her, I crept to the small bedroom window and peeled back the curtain. The darkness outside was absolute. Our generator had shut off on its timer hours ago and there was no moon. I could see nothing beyond the glass, but the voices continued, sometimes seeming very close, sometimes fading as if the speakers were walking away. "Sarah," one of the voices said, and it was my voice, exactly as I sounded when I was concerned about her. "Sarah, where are you going?" "I'm here," came the response in Sarah's voice, but somehow flat and emotionless compared to her usual warmth. "I'm right here, Derek." I looked back at the bed. Sarah was still there, still asleep, still breathing steadily. But outside, our voices continued their strange, distant conversation. Terror crept up my spine like ice water. I wanted to wake Sarah, wanted to tell her what I was hearing, but some instinct warned me to stay quiet. Whatever was outside, mimicking our voices in the darkness, I didn't want it to know we were awake. The conversation faded gradually, the voices growing more distant until they merged back into the oppressive silence of the forest. I sat by the window for another hour, watching and listening, but heard nothing more. When I finally returned to bed, Sarah stirred slightly and murmured something in her sleep. I pressed my face into her hair, breathing in her familiar scent, trying to convince myself that what I'd heard was just a dream. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Morning brought no relief. I woke to gray, overcast skies and a forest that looked somehow different in daylight. Darker, more oppressive, as if the trees had grown closer during the night. Sarah was already up, making coffee in the RV's tiny kitchen. "Sleep okay?" she asked, handing me a steaming mug. I hesitated, unsure how to explain what I'd heard without sounding crazy. "Did you hear anything strange last night?" She paused, coffee mug halfway to her lips. "Like what?" "Voices, outside, around 3 a.m. Sarah shook her head slowly, but there was something in her expression. A flicker of uncertainty maybe, or confusion. I slept like a rock. Why? I decided not to push it. Maybe I had been dreaming. Maybe the isolation and the strange warnings from the old man had gotten to me more than I'd realized. We spent the morning exploring the area around our campsite. The forest was beautiful in the pale morning light, but that unnatural silence persisted. No birds, no squirrels, no insects. Even our footsteps seemed muffled, as if the forest itself was absorbing every sound. The lake remained perfectly still, its surface like black mirror. When I threw a stone into it, expecting the satisfying splash and ripples, the water seemed to swallow the stone without a trace. No splash, no ripples, just a tiny hole in the surface that closed immediately, leaving the lake as smooth and undisturbed as before. "That's weird," Sarah said, picking up her own stone. But when she threw it, the same thing happened. The water parted just enough to accept the stone, then sealed itself instantly. We walked the perimeter of the lake, looking for a trail that might lead to higher ground where I could propose with a view of the mountains. But the forest pressed close to the water's edge on all sides. the trees growing so densely that we couldn't penetrate more than a few yards before hitting an impenetrable wall of undergrowth. It was as if the lake existed in its own small bubble of reality, cut off from the rest of the world. By afternoon, the overcast sky had darkened to the color of the old pewter, and a fine mist began to fall. Not quite rain, but heavy enough to drive us back inside the RV. Sarah curled up with a book while I tried to get our satellite radio working, hoping to catch a weather report. But the radio picked up nothing but static. Not even the emergency weather service, which should have been broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Just an endless wash of white noise punctuated by occasional pops and squeaks that sounded almost like voices speaking a language I didn't recognize. "Must be the mountains," Sarah said without looking up from her book, "blocking the signals." But I'd used this radio in plenty of remote locations without any problems. The silence felt deliberate somehow, as if something was actively preventing any signal from reaching us. That evening, I tried starting the RV. We'd been running on battery power since the generator shut off, and I wanted to make sure the engine would turn over if we needed to leave quickly. It wouldn't start. The engine turned over sluggishly, then died. I tried again, pumping the gas pedal, checking all the usual suspects. Nothing. The RV was completely dead. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, coming to stand beside me in the driver's seat. "I don't know. It was running fine yesterday." I popped the hood and climbed out to investigate. The engine looked normal. No obvious leaks, no disconnected wires. But when I tried the starter again, I didn't even get the sluggish turnover. Just a single click from the solenoid, then nothing. Sarah joined me outside, wrapping a jacket around her shoulders against the evening chill. Maybe we should walk back to that main road. Find someone to help. I considered this. The main road was at least 15 miles away, through dense forest on an unmarked trail, and after dark, with only our flashlights to guide us, it would be easy to get lost. "Let's wait until morning," I said. "I'll take another look at the engine when there's better light. If I can't fix it, we'll hike out together." Sarah nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. For the first time since we'd arrived, the isolation felt threatening rather than romantic. We ate dinner inside the RV, conserving our battery power by using only a single LED lantern. The darkness outside pressed against our windows like a living thing, and every few minutes I found myself glancing toward them, expecting to see a face staring back at us. "Derek," Sarah said quietly as we finished eating, "I need to tell you something about last night." My blood chilled. "What about it?" "I did hear voices, just like you described. I was pretending to be asleep, but I heard them. They sounded like us, but—" She shivered. "But wrong, somehow, like they were trying to copy us but couldn't get it quite right. Why didn't you say something this morning?" "I thought I was going crazy. I thought maybe you were too, and if we both admitted to hearing the same impossible thing—" She trailed off, staring at her hands. "What do you think it was?" I didn't have an answer. In the rational light of day, I'd almost convinced myself it had been some kind of auditory hallucination brought on by stress and the strange environment. But hearing Sarah confirm what I'd experienced made it terrifyingly real. "I don't know," I said finally, "but I think we should stick together. No wandering off alone, especially after dark." Sarah nodded emphatically. "Agreed. This place feels, I don't know how to describe it, wrong, somehow." As if in response to her words, we heard the voices again. They started the same way as the night before. Distant conversation from the direction of the lake, too muffled to understand but unmistakably familiar. But this time, they were louder, clearer. And this time, we could make out words. "Where did you put the ring, Derek?" It was my voice, asking the question with casual interest. Sarah's eyes widened. She knew about my plan to propose. I'd told her I had a surprise for her this weekend, though I hadn't revealed the specifics. "In my jacket pocket," came the response in Sarah's voice. "By the door." I felt the blood drain from my face. The ring was indeed in my jacket pocket, the one hanging by the RV's door. But Sarah didn't know that. I'd been careful to hide it from her. "Should we give it to her?" my voice asked outside. "Not yet," Sarah's voice replied. "She's not ready. She's not one of us yet." Sarah gripped my arm so tightly her fingernails drew blood. "Derek," she whispered. "What the hell is that?" The conversation outside continued, our stolen voices discussing us as if we were objects to be manipulated. I crept to the window, but the darkness outside revealed nothing, just our familiar voices, detached from any visible source, planning something terrible in the night. "We should make her come outside," my voice suggested. "Yes," Sarah's voice agreed. "She needs to see the lake." I backed away from the window, pulling Sarah with me toward the rear of the RV. We huddled together on the small couch, listening to our own voices plotting against us in the darkness. "Sarah?" The voice outside, my voice, called toward the RV. "Sarah, could you come out here for a minute? I want to show you something." Sarah's grip on my arm tightened. The voice sounded exactly like me, down to the loving tone I always used when speaking to her. If I'd been asleep, if I hadn't been sitting right here beside her, she might have believed it was really me calling to her. "Sarah?" the voice called again, more insistent now. "It's beautiful out here. You need to see this." Sarah buried her face against my shoulder. I could feel her trembling. "Don't answer," I whispered against her hair. "Don't let it know we can hear it." But the thing outside, whatever it was, seemed to know anyway. "Derek?" Now it was Sarah's voice calling to me. "Derek, I'm by the lake. Come find me." I pressed my eye to the window again, trying to see through the absolute darkness. Nothing. But the voice continued, coming from different directions now, as if Sarah was walking around the lake's perimeter. "Derek, help me," the voice called, and now there was fear in it. The kind of naked terror that would have sent me running outside without a second thought if I hadn't been sitting here with the real Sarah pressed against my side. "Derek, please," the voice sobbed. "Something's wrong. I can't find my way back. I'm lost." Every instinct screamed at me to go to her, to help her, to protect her. The voice was perfect. Every inflection, every catch of breath, every sob exactly as Sarah would sound if she were truly frightened and lost in the darkness. But Sarah was here, safe beside me, and whatever was out there wearing her voice was something else entirely. The calling continued for hours, alternating between my voice and Sarah's, sometimes conversing with each other, sometimes pleading with us to come outside. Around midnight, I heard something that made my blood freeze. It was Sarah's voice, but she was talking to someone else, someone whose voice I recognized as my own father's, dead these past 10 years. "He loves you, you know," my father's voice said, warm and familiar and impossible. "Derek's been carrying that ring around for weeks." "I know," Sarah's voice replied. "I've been waiting. Will you say yes?" "I'll say whatever you want me to say." My father laughed, the deep, booming laugh I remembered from childhood. And then both voices faded into the distance. Beside me, Sarah was crying silently, tears streaming down her face in the dim LED light. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Your father is dead." "I know." "Then how does it know his voice?" I didn't have an answer. Whatever was outside, it was reaching into our memories, our most private thoughts, and using them against us. The voices were too perfect, too precise in their mimicry. This wasn't some natural phenomenon. Dawn seemed to take forever to arrive, and when it finally came, it brought no relief. The gray, overcast light revealed a landscape subtly different from the day before. The trees seemed taller, the forest darker. Even the lake looked wrong. Still mirror smooth, but somehow deeper, as if the bottom had dropped away during the night. "We need to leave," Sarah said, her voice hoarse from crying. "Right now, we'll walk out if we have to." I agreed completely, but first I wanted to try the RV's engine one more time. To my amazement, it started immediately, smooth and strong as if there had never been any problem at all. "Thank God," Sarah breathed as the engine rumbled to life. We broke camp in record time, throwing our gear into the RV with desperate efficiency. Neither of us wanted to spend another minute in this place. As I backed the RV away from our campsite, I caught a glimpse of something in the rearview mirror that made my heart stop. There were two figures standing by the lake's edge, watching us go. From a distance, they looked exactly like Sarah and me. I floored the accelerator, desperate to put distance between us and whatever we'd encountered at Elk Lake. The forest road stretched ahead of us, winding through the dense trees toward what I hoped was safety. But after an hour of driving, I began to recognize landmarks. That distinctive dead tree with the broken top, the rock formation that looked like a sleeping giant, the small creek that ran alongside the road. We'd seen all of these before. Yesterday, on our way in. "Derek," Sarah said quietly, reading the growing panic on my face. "Are we going in circles?" I checked our compass, but the needle spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. Our GPS remained dead, showing only that gray error screen. And the road ahead looked exactly like the road we'd traveled the day before, despite the fact that we were supposedly heading in the opposite direction. "This is impossible," I muttered, pulling over to check our paper map. But the map made no sense either. According to our topographical survey, we should have crossed 3 different creek beds and passed 2 major trail intersections. Instead, we'd seen only the same monotonous forest, the same landmarks, the same road stretching endlessly ahead. We drove for another hour, then another. The gas gauge showed we'd used nearly half a tank, far more than the 15 miles back to the main road should have required. But the landscape never changed. Same trees, same mountains in the distance, same overcast sky pressing down like a gray ceiling. It was Sarah who first noticed that we were heading downhill. "Derek, stop the RV." I pulled over, my hands shaking as I set the parking brake. The slope wasn't dramatic, but it was unmistakable. We were definitely descending, following a gentle grade down toward something. "We've been driving uphill for 2 hours," Sarah said, her voice tight with fear. "We should be heading up, away from the lake, but we're going down." I looked ahead through the windshield. The road curved around a stand of massive cedar trees, disappearing into the green-tinged twilight of the forest. And though I couldn't see what lay beyond that curve, I had a terrible suspicion I already knew. "We're going back," I said quietly. Sarah gripped my arm. "Derek, we can't. We can't go back there." But we didn't seem to have a choice. Behind us, the road stretched up into the mountains, leading back to where we'd come from. Ahead, it led down toward Elk Lake, and somehow, impossibly, they were the same road. I tried reversing direction, turning the RV around to head back up the mountain. But, after another hour of climbing, we reached the same curve in the same stand of cedar trees, facing the same descent toward the lake. The forest had become a trap, and we were caught in it. By the time we crested the rise and saw Elk Lake spread out below us again, the sun was setting behind the mountains. The lake's surface gleamed like black glass in the dying light, and I could swear I saw 2 figures standing at the water's edge, waiting for our return. "Maybe it's not real," Sarah said desperately as I parked the RV in exactly the same spot we'd occupied the night before. "Maybe we're dreaming or hallucinating. Maybe we never left this morning." I wanted to believe that, but the gas gauge showed we'd burned through 3/4 of a tank driving in circles. The engine was hot from hours of hard climbing. This was no dream. As darkness fell, the voices started again, but this time they weren't outside. They were coming from inside the RV. I heard my own voice coming from the bedroom. "Sarah, where are you?" And Sarah's voice answering from the kitchen. "I'm here, Derek. I'm making coffee." We were sitting together on the couch at the time, holding hands, staring at each other in mute terror as our stolen voices carried on a conversation in different parts of our temporary home. "Did you sleep well?" my voice asked. "Like the dead," Sarah's voice replied, and then laughed. A sound like breaking glass. The conversation moved through the RV, our doppelganger voices discussing breakfast plans and hiking trails as if this were any normal camping trip. But underneath the mundane words was something else, a wrongness that made my skin crawl. "I love you," my voice said from somewhere near the door. "I love you too," Sarah's voice replied. "More than you know. Will you come with me? Anywhere. Even to the bottom of the lake? Especially there." Sarah made a sound like a wounded animal. The voices faded, but we could still hear movement in other parts of the RV. Footsteps, cabinet doors opening and closing, the soft sound of someone rummaging through our belongings. But we were alone. I knew we were alone. I grabbed the largest knife from our kitchen drawer and handed Sarah a heavy flashlight. Together, we searched every inch of the RV. The bedroom, the bathroom, the storage compartments, the cabinets, everything. We found nothing, no sign of any intruder. But when we returned to the living area, my jacket was no longer hanging by the door. We found it spread out on the dining table, the engagement ring placed carefully on top of it. The small velvet box sat open, the diamond catching the light from our LED lantern. Sarah stared at the ring, her face pale in the artificial light. Derek. I didn't put it there. My voice came out as a croak. I swear to God, I didn't touch it. She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw the same question that was tearing through my mind. If we were alone in the RV, who had found the ring? Who had laid it out like an offering on our dining table? Maybe we should go outside, Sarah said quietly. The suggestion was so wrong, so contrary to every survival instinct we'd developed over the past 2 nights, that I stared at her in shock. What? Maybe we should go to the lake. See what it wants. There was something in her voice, a flatness, an absence of emotion that reminded me horribly of the stolen voices we'd been hearing. I studied her face in the lamplight, looking for some sign that this was still my Sarah, the woman I loved. Her eyes were different. The warm brown I knew so well had faded to a dull, muddy color. And when she blinked, it was too slow, too deliberate, like someone consciously remembering to perform the action. "Sarah," I said carefully, "how are you feeling?" "Fine," she replied, but the word came out wrong. Too sharp, too quick, as if she'd practiced saying it but couldn't quite manage the right inflection. I backed away from her, the knife still gripped in my hand. "What did you say your favorite color was?" She tilted her head, considering the question with mechanical precision. "Blue," she said finally. It was wrong. Sarah's favorite color was green, specifically the deep forest green of old-growth cedar. She'd told me a dozen times, pointing out paint swatches and clothing in that exact shade. She would never have said blue. This wasn't Sarah. The thing that looked like my girlfriend smiled, and I noticed for the first time that she wasn't blinking at all anymore. Her eyes stared at me with unnatural steadiness, pupils fixed and dilated. "Come with me to the lake, Derek," she said, and her voice was exactly right this time. Warm and loving and perfectly Sarah. If I hadn't been watching her face, hadn't seen those dead, unblinking eyes, I might have believed it was really her. "Where's Sarah?" I demanded, raising the knife between us. "What did you do with her?" The thing wearing Sarah's face laughed, and the sound was like ice cracking. "She's here. She's right here with me. We're sharing." "That's impossible." "Is it?" The thing stood up from the couch, moving with jerky, unnatural movements like a marionette operated by an inexperienced puppeteer. "She's been fighting me all day, trying to warn you, but she's getting tired. Soon there will be only me." As if to prove the point, Sarah's expression suddenly changed. The deadness left her eyes, replaced by desperate terror. "Derek, run!" she gasped, and it was clearly her own voice now, strained with effort. "Don't let it—" But the thing reasserted control, cutting off her words mid-sentence. Sarah's face went blank again, her eyes returning to that unnatural, unblinking stare. "She's strong," the thing said conversationally. "Stronger than most, but not strong enough." I lunged toward the RV's door, but the Sarah thing moved faster than should have been possible, blocking my path. Up close, I could see the wrongness more clearly. Her skin was pale and waxy like a corpse, and there was something swimming just beneath the surface, dark shadows moving under her flesh. "You can't leave, Derek. This is where you belong. This is where you'll always belong." I swung the knife, but the blade passed harmlessly through her body as if she were made of mist. The thing that had been Sarah laughed again. "You can't hurt me, but I can hurt you. I can hurt her." Sarah's face contorted in agony, and I heard her voice screaming from somewhere far away as if she were trapped at the bottom of a deep well. "Stop it," I shouted. "Let her go." "Come to the lake," the thing repeated. "Join us willingly and I'll make it easy for both of you. Refuse, and I'll make her suffer until there's nothing left of her but screaming." The RV's lights flickered and died, plunging us into absolute darkness. I heard movement around me. Footsteps, whispers, the sound of something wet slithering across the floor. But when I fumbled for my flashlight and clicked it on, I was alone. The RV was empty. Sarah was gone. I burst through the door and into the night, flashlight beam swinging wildly across the campsite. "Sarah, where are you?" Here, her voice came from the direction of the lake, calm and patient. "I'm waiting for you." I ran toward the sound, my flashlight cutting a narrow swath through the darkness. The beam found her standing at the lake's edge, perfectly still, her back to me. "Sarah, thank God. Are you all right?" She didn't answer. As I got closer, I could see that she was still wearing the clothes she'd had on in the RV, but they were soaked through as if she'd been swimming. Water dripped from her hair, forming small puddles on the rocky shore. "Sarah." I reached out to touch her shoulder. She turned around. Her face was blue-white and bloated, her eyes clouded like milk. Lake water poured from her mouth when she tried to speak, and I could see things moving in her hair. Small, dark shapes that might have been leeches or baby eels. "Come swim with me, Derek," she said, and her voice was the sound of drowning. "The water's perfect." I stumbled backward, my flashlight beam wavering. This couldn't be Sarah. This was some horrible trick, some nightmare manifestation of the thing that had taken her. But as I watched, her appearance flickered like a bad television signal. For just a moment, I saw the real Sarah underneath. Terrified, desperate, mouthing the word, "Run," over and over again. Then the drowned thing reasserted itself, smiling with lips that were turning black at the edges. "She's still here," it said with Sarah's ruined voice. "She's just deeper now. Would you like to see how deep the lake goes?" The water behind her began to churn and bubble, as if something massive was rising from the depths. My flashlight beam couldn't penetrate the black surface, but I could hear sounds from below. A rhythmic thumping like a giant heartbeat, and voices calling out in languages I didn't recognize. "The lake remembers everyone who's ever been here," the drowned Sarah told me. "All the campers, all the hikers, all the people who got lost in these woods. They're all down there, Derek, waiting. We have such a large family now." The surface of the lake erupted as something breached. Not one thing, but many things, pale and writhing and wrong. Bodies in various stages of decay, but all of them moving, all of them reaching toward shore with grasping, desperate hands. Among them, I saw faces I recognized. The old man who'd warned us about Elk Lake, a young couple in hiking gear, a family with 2 small children. All of them had the same clouded, dead eyes as the thing wearing Sarah's form. "Join us," they called in unison, their voices creating a hideous chorus. "Join us, join us, join us." I ran. Behind me, I could hear them emerging from the lake, the wet slap of bare feet on stone, the sound of water pouring from bloated lungs. They moved faster than any corpse should have been able to move, and their voices followed me into the forest. "Derek," Sarah's voice clear and desperate and completely alive. "Derek, help me." I wanted to go back. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to return to the lake, to save her, to pull her away from whatever had taken her. But I knew with horrible certainty that the Sarah calling to me was just bait, another trick by the thing that had consumed the real woman I loved. I ran through the forest without direction, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly off tree trunks and low-hanging branches. Behind me, the voices of the lake's victims grew fainter, but never disappeared entirely. They were hunting me, following some trail I couldn't perceive, and it was only a matter of time before they caught up. The forest seemed infinite. No matter how far I ran, how many turns I took, I never reached its edge. The trees stretched on, an endless maze of bark and shadow. My lungs burned. My legs screamed in protest, but I couldn't stop. To stop was to die, or worse, to join the pale things that called the lake home. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning in this place. When I finally collapsed from exhaustion, my flashlight beam revealed something that made me weep with relief. A road. Not the Forest Service road that had brought us here, but a real road. Paved asphalt with yellow center lines, the kind of road that led to civilization. I staggered onto it, chose a direction at random, and began walking. Dawn was breaking when I saw the truck approaching, an 18-wheeler hauling logs, probably heading to one of the mills in the valley. I stood in the middle of the road, waving my arms frantically until the driver pulled over. The trucker was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a concerned expression. "Jesus, buddy, you look like hell. What happened to you?" I couldn't begin to explain. Instead, I told him my RV had broken down and asked for a ride to the nearest town. He helped me into the cab, gave me coffee from his thermos, and asked no more questions when he saw I wasn't ready to talk. The town was called Mill Creek, and it had a sheriff's office. I told Deputy Marshal what I could, that my girlfriend was missing, that she'd disappeared from our campsite at Elk Lake, that they needed to send a search party immediately. The deputy listened patiently, taking notes, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. When I finished, he consulted his computer and frowned. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's no lake by that name in this county. No Elk Lake, no campground there." "Are you sure about the location?" I insisted. Described the Forest Service road, the landmarks we'd passed. But according to the deputy's maps, both paper and digital, the area I described was empty wilderness. No lake, no campground, no roads leading to either. "You've been through some kind of trauma," he said gently. "Maybe you hit your head, got turned around. Sometimes the mind plays tricks on us when we're scared and alone in the woods." They took me to the hospital, where a doctor examined me for signs of head injury or drug use. I was dehydrated and exhausted, with multiple cuts and bruises from my flight through the forest, but otherwise physically unharmed. The blood tests came back clean. A psychiatrist was called in. Dr. Martinez was a soft-spoken woman who listened to my story without judgment, asking gentle questions about my relationship with Sarah, my mental health history, my use of alcohol or drugs. When I insisted that everything I'd told them was true, she prescribed medication for anxiety and suggested I might be suffering from a stress-induced psychotic episode. But I knew what I'd experienced. I knew Sarah was real. The authorities found her easily enough when I provided her full name and address. Sarah Rodriguez, 29, a graphic designer from Seattle. The problem was, according to everyone who knew her, she'd never met anyone named Derek Spencer. Her friends, her family, her co-workers, none of them had ever heard my name. There were no photographs of us together, no text messages, no evidence that we'd ever been in a relationship. As far as the world was concerned, I was a stranger who'd become obsessed with a woman I'd never actually met. The engagement ring, the one I'd carried with such hope and excitement, was gone. I'd left it in the RV when I fled, but the receipt in my jacket pocket showed only a cash purchase of a keychain from a gas station. The jewelry store where I was certain I'd bought the ring had no record of the transaction. They kept me in the psychiatric ward for 2 weeks. Dr. Martinez was patient and kind, working with me to develop what she called coping strategies for dealing with elaborate delusions. She helped me understand how isolation and stress could create false memories so vivid they seemed completely real. Eventually, I was released. I returned to Seattle, to my apartment, to my job, to a life that felt hollow and wrong in ways I couldn't explain. Everyone was very understanding about my episode. My employer gave me extended medical leave. My friends checked on me regularly, careful not to ask too many questions about what had happened during my solo camping trip. Solo. That's how they all remembered it. Derek Spencer taking a solo camping trip to clear his head after a difficult period in his life. No girlfriend named Sarah, no romantic getaway, no proposal planned beside a pristine mountain lake. But I remember her. I remember everything. I remember the way Sarah laughed when I told stupid jokes. I remember how she looked in that ridiculous pom-pom hat. I remember her hand in mine as we drove through the mountains, her excitement about finding the perfect spot to be alone together. I remember her face in those final moments, flickering between the woman I loved and the drowned thing that had taken her place. I remember her voice calling my name as I ran into the forest, growing fainter and fainter until it was just another sound in the wind. Sometimes, late at night, I think I can still hear her calling. And sometimes, when I'm not careful about taking my medication, I find myself planning another trip to the mountains. I tell myself I'm going to find that Forest Service road, that campsite, that impossible lake. I'm going to prove that it was all real, that Sarah existed, that the woman I loved is still out there somewhere. But I know the truth. I've known it since that first night when the voices started calling from the darkness. The lake doesn't just take people. It takes the memory of them, erases them so completely that it's as if they never existed at all. Everyone except the one person who loved them most, who gets to carry the burden of remembering someone the world has forgotten. I don't know why I was spared. Maybe because I ran. Maybe because my love for Sarah was strong enough to anchor some part of her in my memory, even after the lake claimed her body and soul. Or maybe because the thing in the water wanted me to suffer, to live with the knowledge that I'd abandoned the woman I loved to save myself, and that no one would ever believe what I'd seen. It's been 3 years now. 3 years of medication and therapy and well-meaning friends who worry about my fixation on this imaginary girlfriend. 3 years of living in a world that insists Sarah Rodriguez never existed, even though I can still smell her shampoo on my pillow some mornings. But I know she was real, and somewhere in the black depths of a lake that supposedly doesn't exist, she's still waiting for me to come back for her. Sometimes I think I will. Sometimes I think that's the only way this story can end, with me driving back into those mountains, following roads that don't appear on any map, returning to a campsite that exists only in my fractured memory. Maybe that's what the lake wants. Maybe it's just waiting for me to stop running, to stop taking my medication, to give in to the voices that still call my name in the darkest hours of the night. Maybe that's what love really means, refusing to let go, even when the rest of the world forgets. Maybe that's what makes us human in the face of things that should not be. I don't know, but I do know this. Every morning when I wake up, I check the weather in the mountains. I read about camping conditions, trail closures, road conditions in Gifford Pinchot National Forest. Just in case today is the day I stop fighting the pull of that dark water. Just in case today is the day I go back for Sarah. Because I love her. And love doesn't die, even when everything else does. Even when the world forgets she ever existed at all. We should have never gone to the Bighorn Mountains. I'm Marcus. I was 28 back then. And this is the story of how I lost everything. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway. 4 college friends, 1 borrowed RV, and 72 hours of hiking, drinking, and pretending we weren't all slowly drifting apart as adult life consumed us. Derek had insisted on the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming, some remote campground he'd found online that promised pristine wilderness and total solitude. Ryan, always the planner, had mapped out hiking trails. Jake brought enough electronic gadgets to power a small city, despite the fact that cell service was supposedly non-existent up there. The drive from Denver took 8 hours, winding through increasingly desolate landscape until we were threading our way up narrow mountain roads bordered by dense pine forests. The kind of trees that seem to lean in over the asphalt, creating tunnels of green shadow even in broad daylight. Jesus, Derek, you sure you didn't accidentally book us a spot in the middle of nowhere? Jake muttered from the passenger seat, squinting at his phone. I lost signal about 50 miles ago. Derek laughed from behind me. That easy, confident sound that had gotten him through 4 years of college without ever seeming to stress about anything. That's the point, man. Complete disconnection. When's the last time any of us went more than 2 hours without checking our phones? He wasn't wrong. Even now, I caught Jake reflexively tapping his screen every few minutes, as if signal bars might magically appear through sheer force of will. The Pine Ridge campground consisted of 12 RV spots arranged in a loose circle around a central fire pit, with wilderness trails radiating out like spokes from a wheel. We were the only occupants. Not surprising, given that it was late October and the temperatures were already dropping into the 30s at night. The camp host was an elderly man named Earl who looked like he'd been carved from the same weathered pine as the surrounding trees. "Y'all picked a good time," he said, helping Ryan figure out the electrical hookups while the rest of us unloaded gear. "Hunting season's over, summer crowds are long gone. Just you and the mountains." He paused, squinting up at the sky where afternoon clouds were beginning to gather. "Weather's supposed to turn tonight, though. Might want to stick close to camp if it does." "What kind of weather?" Ryan asked, but Earl had already shambled back toward his own small trailer at the edge of the campground, either not hearing or choosing not to answer. We spent the rest of Thursday settling in and planning our hiking routes. The RV was cramped with 4 grown men, but it beat sleeping in tents when temperatures dropped. Derek and Jake took the tiny bunk beds in the back, while Ryan and I got the convertible dinette and couch. By 10 p.m., we were all nursing beers around a crackling campfire, feeling like we'd successfully escaped civilization. "Remember freshman year, when we hiked that trail in Boulder?" Derek said, poking at the fire with a stick. "And Jake got so lost we had to send a search party." "That was different," Jake protested. "This was before smartphones. I had a fucking compass that pointed in 4 directions. Still got lost," Ryan grinned. "Took us 6 hours to find you. You were sitting by that creek, convinced you'd discovered some unmapped wilderness." We laughed, but something about the memory felt strange now. The darkness beyond our firelight seemed absolute. No distant glow of cities, no airplane lights crossing overhead. Just endless black punctuated by the occasional snap of settling wood or whisper of wind through pine needles. Around midnight, we doused the fire and retreated to the RV. I fell asleep to the sound of Derek and Jake talking quietly in the back, their voices gradually fading as exhaustion overtook excitement. I woke to Ryan shaking my shoulder, weak morning light filtering through the RV's small windows. "Marcus, wake up. Derek's gone." I sat up, instantly alert. The bunk where Derek should have been sleeping was empty, his sleeping bag unzipped and hanging open like a shed skin. "What do you mean, gone?" I asked, though even as the words left my mouth I could feel the wrongness of it. The RV felt too empty, too quiet. "I mean, gone," Ryan repeated. "Jake woke up around 4 and Derek wasn't here. We figured he went to take a piss, but..." He gestured toward the small bathroom. "Doors open, nobody inside. We've been looking around the campground for an hour." Jake appeared in the doorway, his normally pale face even whiter than usual. "His boots are still here," he said quietly. "Jacket too, and it's maybe 35 degrees out there." We spent the next 2 hours combing the immediate area around the campground, calling Derek's name until our voices were hoarse. Earl emerged from his trailer around 8 a.m., listened to our explanation with the kind of practiced calm that suggested he'd dealt with missing campers before. "Happens sometimes," he said, scratching his stubbled chin. "Folks get up to relieve themselves, get turned around in the dark. Usually they turn up by noon, embarrassed and cold, but otherwise fine." "But his boots," Jake started. "Young men do stupid things," Earl interrupted. "I've seen people wander off in their underwear because they were too drunk or too asleep to think straight. Give it a few more hours before you panic." But I was already panicking. Derek might have been carefree, but he wasn't stupid. He wouldn't have wandered into sub-freezing wilderness in his socks and t-shirt, no matter how disoriented he might have been. We waited until noon, as Earl suggested. Then until 2 p.m. By 3 o'clock, Ryan was ready to drive back down the mountain to find cell service and call for help. But Jake convinced us to wait until morning. "If he's out there, he needs us here when he comes back," Jake reasoned. "And if something happened to him?" He didn't finish the thought. That night, we barely slept. Every sound, every creak of settling wood, every whisper of wind might have been Derek returning. But dawn came cold and gray, with no sign of our missing friend. We were preparing to pack up and leave when Jake spotted him. "There." He pointed toward the tree line on the far side of the campground. "Derek, holy shit, Derek." And there he was, walking slowly between the pines about 50 yards away. Even from that distance, I could see he was barefoot, wearing the same t-shirt and boxers he'd gone to sleep in. But he was walking. He was alive. "Derek!" Ryan shouted, and we all ran toward him. Derek stopped walking and turned toward us. He smiled, that same easy grin we'd seen 1,000 times before. But something about it made me falter, slowing from a run to a jog to an uncertain walk. "Hey guys," Derek said as we approached. His voice sounded normal, maybe a little hoarse from the cold. "Sorry about that." "Jesus Christ, man, where the hell have you been?" Ryan demanded, but his relief was obvious. "We were about to call search and rescue. Got turned around," Derek said simply. "Went to take a leak and couldn't find my way back in the dark. Spent the night in a little cave about half a mile that way." He gestured vaguely toward the trees. "Figured I'd wait for daylight to come back." It was a reasonable explanation. Exactly the kind of thing Earl had said happened all the time. So why did something feel wrong? "Dude, your feet," Jake said, staring down at Derek's bare soles. "They should be completely fucked up. You've been walking on rocks and pine needles for 2 days." I looked down and felt my stomach lurch. Derek's feet were dirty but unmarked. No cuts, no bruises, no signs of frostbite despite 2 nights in near-freezing temperatures. "Lucky, I guess," Derek said with a shrug. "The cave was pretty sheltered." Jake frowned. "What cave? We've been all over this area. There aren't any caves around here." Something flickered across Derek's face, too quick to interpret, there and gone in an instant. "Must have missed it," he said. "It's pretty well hidden. Show us," Ryan said. Derek's smile never wavered. "Sure, after I get cleaned up and grab some food. I'm fucking starving." That's when I noticed the second thing that was wrong. Derek's breath. In 35-degree air, the rest of us were producing visible puffs of vapor with every word. Derek wasn't. His breath was completely invisible, as if the air coming from his lungs was the same temperature as the atmosphere around us. I told myself I was being paranoid. Shock from relief, maybe. Or the way morning light could play tricks with shadows and perception. Derek walked back to the RV with us, chattering about his adventure in the woods. He described the cave in vague terms. Pretty deep, sheltered from the wind. Some kind of mineral deposits on the walls that reflected moonlight. When pressed for more specific details, he'd just shrug and say he'd been too focused on staying warm to pay close attention to his surroundings. Inside the RV, he immediately headed for the tiny bathroom. I heard the shower running and tried to convince myself that everything was fine. Derek was back. He was safe. We could pack up and head home, and in a week, this would just be another story to tell at parties. But when Derek emerged from the bathroom 20 minutes later, wrapped in a towel with his dark hair slicked back, I noticed the third wrong thing. He wasn't blinking. Not never. I watched him carefully over the next hour, trying not to be obvious about it. He blinked occasionally, but far less frequently than normal. Maybe once every minute or two, where a typical person blinks 15 to 20 times per minute. And when he did blink, it looked deliberate somehow. Conscious, like he was remembering to do it rather than responding to some automatic biological function. "So, what's the plan?" Derek asked, sitting on the dinette bench across from me. "We still doing the Devil's Canyon Trail today?" Ryan looked up from the map he'd been studying. "I figured we'd head back. You've been missing for 2 days, man. Maybe we should get you checked out by a doctor." "Why?" Derek's head tilted slightly, and for just a moment his expression was utterly blank. Then the familiar grin returned. "I feel fine. Better than fine, actually. I feel refreshed." Jake had been quiet since Derek's return, pecking away at his laptop despite the lack of internet connection. "Derek," he said without looking up from his screen, "what's my girlfriend's name?" "What?" "My girlfriend. I've been dating her for 8 months. What's her name?" Derek's smile flickered. "Come on, man. You know I'm terrible with names. You've met her like 12 times, Jake insisted. "You helped me pick out her birthday present in August." "Jessica," Derek guessed. Jake finally looked up, his face pale. "I don't have a girlfriend. I haven't had a girlfriend since sophomore year." The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Derek's grin remained fixed, but something shifted behind his eyes, like shadows moving beneath ice. "Just testing if you were paying attention," Derek said finally. "You always were the paranoid one, Jake." But Jake wasn't buying it, and neither was I. The wrongness I'd felt since Derek's return was crystallizing into something approaching certainty. This wasn't just exhaustion or mild hypothermia affecting Derek's behavior. Something fundamental was different about him. "I think we should go," I said quietly. "Pack up and head home." "Why?" Derek asked, and there was something in his voice. Too sharp, too interested. "We just got here, and I've been looking forward to hiking Devil's Canyon." Ryan folded his map. "Marcus is right. We've had enough excitement for one trip." Derek's expression went completely flat. No grin, no warmth, just empty evaluation. "No," he said. "I don't think we're leaving yet." "What do you mean you don't think?" Ryan started, but Derek cut him off. "I said no." The way he said it, calm, absolute, final, made all of us freeze. In 4 years of friendship, I'd never heard Derek speak with that kind of authority. He was the easygoing one, always quick to defer to stronger personalities like Ryan's. "Okay," Ryan said carefully. "Why don't we vote on it? All in favor of packing up?" Jake and I raised our hands immediately. Ryan raised his after a moment's hesitation. Derek smiled again, but this time it was different. Wider. Too wide, stretching his lips in a way that looked almost painful. 3 against 1, he said. "Democracy in action." He stood up from the dinette. "I'm going for a walk." "Derek, wait." But he was already out the door, moving with a strange, fluid grace that didn't look quite right. As soon as he was gone, Jake slammed his laptop shut. "We need to get the fuck out of here. Right now." "It's Derek," Ryan said, but he didn't sound convinced. "No, it isn't." Jake's voice was shaking. "I've been thinking about it since he came back. Really thinking. And I don't think that's Derek anymore." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. The breathing, the blinking, the way he'd forgotten basic facts about our lives, it all added up to something I didn't want to believe. "So, what are you suggesting?" Ryan asked. "That something killed Derek and is wearing his skin?" "I don't know," Jake admitted. "Maybe. Or maybe something happened to him out there, changed him somehow." Through the RV's window, I could see Derek standing at the edge of the tree line, perfectly motionless. He'd been there for at least 10 minutes, not moving, not looking around, just standing and staring into the forest. "Look at him," I whispered. Ryan and Jake crowded around the window. Derek stood like a statue, unnaturally still in a way that no living person could manage. Even from a distance, we could see that he wasn't breathing. No puff of vapor in the cold air, no rise and fall of his chest. "Jesus Christ," Ryan breathed. That's when we heard the first whisper. It was so soft I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Just the wind through pine needles. But then it came again. Clearer this time. A voice, definitely human, calling from somewhere in the trees beyond where Derek stood. "Help me!" Jake grabbed my arm. "Did you hear that?" We all had. The voice came again, weak and desperate. "Please, help me." And this time I recognized it. The voice belonged to Derek. The real Derek. Through the window, we could see the thing wearing Derek's face turn toward the sound. Its too wide smile stretched even further, and it began walking into the trees. "We have to help him," Ryan said, already moving toward the door. "No," Jake grabbed his arm. "Don't you see? It's a trap. That thing is using Derek's voice to lure us out there." "But what if it really is Derek?" Ryan pulled free. "What if the real Derek is hurt somewhere and that thing is going after him?" Another cry for help echoed from the forest, weaker this time, more desperate. I felt torn between 2 equally horrible possibilities. Either we were abandoning our real friend to die, or we were walking into a trap that would get us all killed. But as I listened to that voice, Derek's voice, begging for help, I realized I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try. "We go together," I said finally. "We stick close, and at the first sign of trouble, we run." Ryan was already pulling on his jacket. Jake looked terrified, but nodded. We left the RV together, moving cautiously toward the tree line where Derek's voice had originated. The forest was eerily quiet. No bird calls, no rustling of small animals, just our footsteps crunching on fallen pine needles. "Derek," Ryan called. "Where are you?" "Here," came the weak reply from deeper in the trees. "I'm hurt. I can't move." We followed the voice for maybe 200 yards, pushing through thick undergrowth and around massive pine trunks. The deeper we went, the darker it became, even though it was still mid-afternoon. The canopy overhead seemed to swallow the light. "Derek," Jake called. "Keep talking so we can find you." I'm over here," the voice responded, but it sounded different now. Closer to normal strength, less panicked, by the big fallen log. We found the log, a massive pine that must have fallen years ago, its trunk easily 6 feet in diameter. But there was no sign of Derek. "Where are you?" Ryan called, circling the log. "I don't see." The voice came from directly behind us. "Right here." We spun around to find Derek, or the thing that looked like Derek, standing maybe 10 feet away. Its smile was gone, replaced by an expression of cold hunger. "Run," I whispered. But it was too late. The thing moved faster than anything human had a right to move, covering the distance between us in what felt like a single bound. I saw its hand, Derek's hand, but wrong, somehow. The fingers too long and ending in what looked like blackened nails, reach for Jake. Jake screamed as those fingers wrapped around his throat. The sound was cut short as the thing lifted him off the ground with impossible strength. Ryan and I ran. We crashed through the underbrush like terrified animals, branches whipping at our faces, roots trying to trip us with every step. Behind us, Jake's scream rose and fell and rose again, echoing through the trees in a way that suggested something very bad was happening to him. I don't know how long we ran. Long enough for my lungs to burn and my legs to turn to jelly. Long enough for the screaming behind us to stop, leaving only the sound of our own panicked breathing and the whisper of wind through pine needles. When we finally collapsed against a tree to catch our breath, Ryan grabbed my arm. "We have to go back for him." "Are you insane?" I panted. "Did you see how fast that thing moved? How strong it was?" "Jake's our friend," Ryan insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. We both knew what we'd heard, what Jake's screams had turned into toward the end. No one survived making sounds like that. "Jake's dead," I said, hating the words as they left my mouth. "And if we go back, we'll be dead too." Ryan stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "So, what do? We get back to the RV. We get the hell out of here." But finding our way back proved harder than expected. The forest all looked the same, endless ranks of pine trees stretching in every direction. We'd run in blind panic, with no thought to direction or landmarks. Now, every path between the trees looked identical. We wandered for what felt like hours, growing increasingly desperate. The sun was setting, and temperatures were dropping fast. We had no supplies, no warm clothing, no way to start a fire. If we didn't find the campground soon, we'd freeze to death long before whatever had taken Derek and Jake found us. That's when we started hearing Jake's voice. "Ryan! Marcus! Where are you guys?" We froze, staring at each other in horror. Jake's voice sounded perfectly normal. Concerned, maybe a little scared, but definitely alive. "Come on, guys. This isn't funny anymore." "It's not him," I whispered. Ryan nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. What if it really was Jake? What if he'd somehow escaped that thing? "Ryan, Marcus," the voice was getting closer. "I found Derek. He's hurt, but he's alive." That decided it for me. No way Jake could have found Derek, not when Derek, the real Derek, was dead. The thing that had taken his place was still out there, and now it was using Jake's voice to hunt us. We ran again, crashing blindly through the darkening forest. Jake's voice followed us, sometimes close, sometimes distant, always perfectly mimicking our friend's speech patterns and inflections. "Guys, please, Derek's really hurt. I need help getting him back to camp." Then, from a different direction, "I see your flashlight. Stay where you are, I'm coming to you." But we didn't have a flashlight. We had nothing but the clothes on our backs and the growing certainty that we were being hunted by something that could perfectly mimic human voices. Full darkness had fallen by the time we stumbled, more by luck than skill, back into the clearing where Pine Ridge Campground sat. Our RV looked like a beacon of salvation. warm light spilling from its windows onto the empty campsites around it. But Earl's trailer was dark. "Where's Earl?" Ryan whispered as we approached the RV. I didn't answer because I'd just spotted something that made my blood run cold. The campground's central fire pit, which had been cold and empty when we'd left that afternoon, was now burning brightly. And arranged around it in a perfect circle were our missing supplies. Our hiking boots, our jackets, our backpacks. All the gear we'd left in the RV laid out like offerings around the fire. "We need to get in the RV and leave," I said. "Now!" But as we approached our sanctuary, Jake's voice called out from the darkness beyond the firelight. "Thank God! There you are!" Jake emerged from the shadows looking exactly as he had that morning. No signs of injury, no torn clothing, nothing to suggest he'd been attacked by some impossible thing in the forest. "Where have you been?" he asked, jogging toward us. "I've been looking everywhere for you guys." Ryan started toward him, relief evident on his face. "Jake, Jesus, we thought you were—" "Stop!" I grabbed Ryan's arm. "Look at his eyes. See, Jake was maybe 20 feet away now, close enough to see clearly in the firelight. And his eyes were wrong. Not the color. They were still the same brown they'd always been, but the way he was looking at us. Like we were food. Like he was calculating the best way to take us down." "What happened to Derek?" I called out. Jake's expression didn't change. "Derek's fine. He's back at camp, sleeping. Poor guy's exhausted from his time in the woods." "Show us," Ryan said. "Sure." Jake smiled, and like the thing wearing Derek's face, his smile was too wide. "He's right over there." He pointed toward Earl's dark trailer, and that's when I noticed that the door was standing open, revealing nothing but black emptiness inside. "That's not the RV," I said. Jake's smile never wavered. "No, it isn't." That's when Ryan finally understood. I saw the realization hit him like a physical blow, and he took a step backward. "You're not Jake," he whispered. "Of course I'm Jake," the thing replied. "Who else would I be?" "Where is he?" Ryan demanded. "Where's our friend?" The thing that looked like Jake tilted its head, considering the question with apparent seriousness. "He's right here," it said finally. "I'm wearing him." Ryan made a sound that might have been a sob or a scream. I felt my own sanity sliding toward something dark and final. "What are you?" I asked. "Hungry," the thing replied simply. Then it moved. Like the Derek thing before it, the creature wearing Jake's face moved with impossible speed. But this time, we were ready. As it lunged toward us, Ryan and I dove in opposite directions, rolling and scrambling toward the RV. I reached the door first, yanking it open and diving inside. Ryan was right behind me, slamming the door and engaging the deadbolt. "Keys," Ryan panted. "Where are the keys?" I fumbled through my pockets but came up empty. Check the table. Check everywhere. We tore the RV apart looking for the keys while something that sounded like Jake pounded on the door. "Come on, guys," it called in Jake's perfectly normal voice. "This is ridiculous. Just let me in and we'll talk about this." The pounding stopped. A moment later, we heard footsteps moving around the RV's exterior. "Found them!" Ryan held up the keys triumphantly. But as he moved toward the driver's seat, something tapped on the window beside him. We both looked out to see Derek's face pressed against the glass, smiling that too wide smile. His breath didn't fog the window at all. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his voice muffled by the glass but clearly audible. Ryan fumbled with the keys, trying to get the engine started. The RV turned over once, twice, then caught with a roar. But as Ryan put it in drive, something landed on the roof with a heavy thump. "Drive!" I screamed. Ryan floored the gas pedal. The RV lurched forward, tires spinning on the loose gravel. Whatever was on the roof held on, and I could hear it moving around up there, looking for a way in. We bounced over the rough camp road, trees whipping past the windows. Behind us, I could see the glow of the campfire growing distant. But the thing on our roof was still there, its footsteps audible over the roar of the engine. Then the windshield exploded inward. Ryan screamed and swerved as safety glass showered the cabin. Through the gaping hole where the windshield had been, Derek's grinning face appeared, upside down. "Miss me?" he asked. His arm, impossibly long now, stretched and distorted, reached through the broken windshield toward Ryan. Those blackened fingernails raked across Ryan's face, opening 4 parallel gashes from temple to jaw. Ryan lost control. The RV went off the narrow road, plowed through a stand of young pines, and slammed into a massive tree trunk with a sound like the world ending. I was thrown forward, my head striking something hard. Stars exploded across my vision, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was or what was happening. When my vision cleared, the RV was tilted at a crazy angle, steam rising from the crumpled hood. Ryan was slumped over the steering wheel, blood running down his face from the gashes Derek had left. But he was breathing. Derek was gone. I shook Ryan until he groaned and lifted his head. "We have to go," I whispered. "Can you walk?" He nodded groggily. I helped him out of the driver's seat and toward the door, but it wouldn't open. The crash had warped the frame. We were trapped. That's when we heard Jake's voice from outside. "Guys, are you okay in there?" That sounded like a bad crash. The voice was coming from the driver's side of the RV, where the door was. Concerned, helpful, perfectly normal. "We're fine," Ryan called back automatically. I grabbed his arm, shaking my head frantically, but it was too late. "Good," Jake's voice replied. "Stay right there. I'll get you out." Something began tearing at the RV's exterior wall. Not prying or cutting, but literally tearing through the aluminum siding like it was paper. Long gashes appeared in the wall near the door, followed by what looked like fingers pushing through the gaps. But the fingers were wrong. Too long, too thin, ending in those blackened nails. And there were too many of them. 6 or 7 per hand instead of 5. "Back window," I whispered to Ryan. We made our way to the rear of the tilted RV, stepping carefully over debris from the crash. The back window was small, but not too small to climb through if we were desperate enough. And we were definitely desperate enough. I used a broken piece of the dinette table to smash out the window, then helped Ryan climb through. I was right behind him, dropping to the ground just as the thing wearing Jake's face finally tore its way into the RV. "Run," I said. We ran into the forest, leaving the dying RV behind. I could hear the thing destroying the interior, probably looking for us. When it realized we were gone, it would follow. But we had a head start, and this time we had direction. The main road couldn't be more than a mile or 2 away. If we could reach it, flag down a car. We made it maybe half a mile before Ryan collapsed. "I can't," he gasped, clutching his side. "Something's broken. Ribs, maybe." I knelt beside him, trying to think. We couldn't stay here. The thing would track us down eventually. But Ryan couldn't run anymore, and I couldn't carry him. "Leave me," Ryan whispered. "Get help. Come back for me." I was about to argue when we heard it, the sound of voices calling our names from back toward the crash site. But not just 2 voices, a whole chorus of them, all perfectly mimicking people we knew. Derek. "Marcus! Ryan! Where are you guys?" Jake. "Come on, don't make this harder than it has to be." My mother's voice. "Marcus, honey, come home." Ryan's ex-girlfriend. "Ryan, I forgive you. Just come back to me." My dead grandfather. "Boy, you always were too stubborn for your own good." The thing had access to our memories somehow. It was pulling voices from our past, using them to torment us. "Jesus Christ," Ryan breathed. The voices were getting closer, coming from multiple directions now. We were surrounded. "Up," I said, hauling Ryan to his feet. "We climb." The tree beside us was enormous, its lowest branches maybe 8 feet off the ground. I gave Ryan a boost, then pulled myself up after him. We climbed as high as we dared, maybe 30 feet up, and waited. The voices passed beneath us, searching. I caught glimpses through the pine needles of figures moving in the darkness below. Sometimes 2, sometimes 3, sometimes just 1. But they all moved with that same fluid, inhuman grace. "Marcus," came my father's voice from directly below our tree. "I know you're up there, son. Come down, let's talk." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. My father had been dead for 3 years. "That's not him," Ryan whispered. "I know." But knowing didn't make it hurt less. The thing wearing my father's voice stood at the base of our tree for what felt like hours, occasionally speaking in that familiar, beloved tone, telling me it was proud of me, asking me to come home, promising that everything would be okay if I just climbed down. Eventually, it moved on, but others took its place. Jake's mother, Ryan's little sister, Derek's college girlfriend, a parade of stolen voices, all trying to lure us down from our precarious perch. Dawn was breaking by the time the voices finally faded. My hands were cramped from gripping the tree branches, and I was shivering uncontrollably in the cold mountain air. But we were alive. "I think they're gone," Ryan whispered. We climbed down carefully, every joint protesting. The forest was quiet now, just normal morning sounds. Birds calling, wind through the trees. If not for the RV crash and the voices we'd heard, we might have convinced ourselves the whole thing had been a nightmare. But Derek and Jake were still missing. Still dead, probably. And we were still lost in the middle of the Wyoming wilderness with no supplies and no way to call for help. We started walking, following what might have been a game trail toward where we hoped the main road lay. The sun was fully up now, warming the air and lifting our spirits slightly. Maybe we'd make it out of this after all. We'd been walking for maybe an hour when we heard the engine. A car, somewhere ahead of us through the trees. The most beautiful sound in the world. "Help!" Ryan shouted, all thoughts of caution forgotten. "Help! We're over here!" We crashed through the underbrush toward the sound, branches tearing at our clothes, hearts pounding with hope and relief. The main road appeared ahead of us, a strip of asphalt winding through the forest like a lifeline. A police cruiser was parked on the shoulder, its driver standing beside it with his back to us. The sight of that uniform, that official presence, almost made me weep with gratitude. "Officer," I called out. "Thank God, we need help." The policeman turned around. It was Derek. Derek's face, Derek's smile, wearing a police uniform that fit perfectly. He looked exactly as he had 3 days ago before any of this started. Healthy, alive, normal. "Well, well," he said in Derek's voice. "Look what we have here." Ryan and I stopped running. We were maybe 50 feet from the road, close enough to see that the police cruiser was real, the uniform authentic. But the thing wearing Derek's face was watching us with that same predatory hunger we'd seen before. "Officers are searching for you," Derek said conversationally. "Missing persons report. Your families are very worried." "You're not Derek," I said. "Of course I'm Derek." The thing smiled that too wide smile. "I'm also Officer Patterson of the Wyoming State Police. Amazing what you can learn from someone if you take the time to really get to know them." Patterson. Jesus Christ, it had killed a cop, taken his place. "You can't mimic everyone," Ryan said desperately. "People will notice. They'll figure out." "Will they?" Derek Patterson tilted his head. "Humans are remarkably unobservant. They see what they expect to see. Officer Patterson called in sick this morning. He'll be back tomorrow, same as always. Maybe a little different, but trauma affects people in various ways." "What do you want from us?" "I want to go home with you," the thing replied. "I want to meet your families, your friends. I want to learn about your lives, your habits, your memories. And then I want to become you." It was insane. Impossible. But looking at this thing wearing Derek's face and Patterson's uniform, I realized it might actually work. At least for a while. "Get in the car," Derek Patterson said, gesturing toward the cruiser. "No. Get in the car, or I'll hunt down everyone you've ever cared about and wear their faces while I kill them." The casual way it said this, like discussing the weather, made my blood freeze. This thing had access to our memories. It knew our families, our friends, our lives. Ryan looked at me, and I saw my own despair reflected in his eyes. We were trapped. Even if we somehow got away, the thing would follow us back to civilization. It would hunt down everyone we loved. "There's another option," Derek Patterson said, as if reading our thoughts. "You could stay here, join your friends in the forest, become part of something larger than yourselves." "What happened to them?" I asked. "Derek and Jake. What did you do to them?" "They're here," the thing replied, patting its chest. "Part of me now. Their memories, their knowledge, their essence. They live on." That's not living, isn't it? Derek Patterson smiled. They'll never grow old, never feel pain or loss or regret. They're perfect now, eternal. A car appeared around the bend in the road, heading toward us. Derek Patterson turned toward it, raising his hand in an official wave. The car slowed, and I could see a middle-aged woman behind the wheel, probably wondering why a state trooper was parked on this remote stretch of road. "Run," I whispered to Ryan. "What about run?" We bolted back into the forest as Derek Patterson walked toward the approaching car. I heard him call out in Officer Patterson's voice, friendly and professional. I heard the woman's car door slam as she got out to see what was wrong. I heard her scream. We ran deeper into the wilderness, crashing through underbrush and around trees. Behind us, the screaming stopped abruptly. Then we heard Derek Patterson calling our names again, but his voice was different now. Higher. Female. The thing was wearing the woman's voice. We ran until our legs gave out, then walked until we couldn't walk anymore. The sun was setting again, and temperatures were dropping. We'd been in the wilderness for almost 48 hours now with no food, no water, no shelter. Even if the thing didn't catch us, we'd probably die of exposure. But as darkness fell, we saw lights ahead. Not the warm glow of campfires or cabin windows, but the harsh white glare of floodlights. "What is that?" Ryan whispered. We approached carefully and found ourselves looking down at what appeared to be some kind of industrial facility hidden in a valley between two ridges. Concrete buildings, chain-link fences, vehicles moving between structures, and people, dozens of them, all wearing identical gray coveralls. "Government facility?" Ryan suggested. "Maybe, or maybe something worse. But it was shelter, and it might have communication equipment. At this point, we were desperate enough to take the risk. We made our way down the slope, keeping to the shadows. As we got closer, I could see that the people in gray coveralls were all working, even though it was nearly midnight. Loading trucks, moving equipment, patrolling the perimeter. And they all moved with that same fluid, inhuman grace. "Oh God," Ryan breathed. "They're all like it." He was right. Every single person in that facility moved the same way Derek and Jake had moved after they'd changed. Whatever the thing was, it wasn't alone. This was some kind of colony. Nest. "We have to get out of here," I whispered, but as we turned to leave, spotlights blazed to life all around us. The sudden glare was blinding after hours in darkness, and I threw up my hands to shield my eyes. "Don't move," came a familiar voice. I lowered my hands and saw Derek walking toward us, still wearing Officer Patterson's uniform. Behind him came a dozen more figures in gray coveralls, all of them moving in perfect synchronization. "You led us right to them," Derek said with obvious satisfaction. "We were wondering when you'd find this place." "What is this place?" Ryan demanded. "Home," Derek replied. "Or it will be, once we've finished preparing it." The figures in coveralls formed a circle around us, their faces blank and empty. But their eyes held that same hungry intelligence I'd seen in Derek and Jake. "How many of you are there?" I asked. "How many stars are in the sky?" Derek countered. "How many grains of sand on a beach?" "We are numerous." "What do you want?" "To live," Derek said simply. "To experience existence through forms capable of complex thought and emotion. Your species has something we lack: creativity, imagination, the ability to dream. We want to understand what it means to be human. By killing us, by becoming you, the original consciousness isn't destroyed, merely absorbed, integrated. Your friend Derek is still alive in a sense. He's part of something greater now." I thought about the way Derek had smiled when he'd said that. Not Derek's smile. Something else wearing Derek's face, mimicking expressions it didn't truly understand. "You're parasites," I said. "We're evolution," Derek corrected. "The next step. Humanity 2.0, if you will." The circle of figures began closing in. I looked around desperately for some avenue of escape, but we were surrounded. The lights, the facility, the dozens of possessed humans. It was hopeless. "It doesn't hurt," Derek said, his voice taking on an almost gentle tone. The integration is quite peaceful, actually, like falling asleep and waking up as something better. Better how? Ryan asked. No more fear, no more pain, no more death. Derek smiled. Isn't that what humanity has always wanted? To transcend its limitations? One of the figures in coveralls stepped forward, and I recognized the face beneath the uniform cap. Officer Patterson, the real one. Or what was left of him. It really is better, Patterson said in his own voice, but with that same empty quality all of them shared. I can remember being afraid of dying. Now that fear is gone. I can remember loving my wife, but that attachment no longer causes me pain. I am free. Free to be a puppet, Ryan spat. Free to be perfect, Patterson corrected. The circle was only a few feet away now. I could smell them. Not a bad smell exactly, but wrong somehow. Like ozone before a thunderstorm, or the air in a room where someone had died. Last chance, Derek said. Join willingly and the transition will be easier. Go to hell, I said. Derek's smile widened impossibly. Hell is other people, Marcus. We're offering you paradise. Then they rushed us. I don't remember much about the next few minutes. Hands grabbing at me, voices speaking in unison. The sensation of something cold and alien pressing against my mind like fingers probing the inside of my skull. But I do remember the explosion. It came from somewhere inside the facility. A massive detonation that lit up the night sky and sent shockwaves rolling across the valley. The possessed humans surrounding us stopped their attack, all turning toward the fire with identical expressions of confusion. In that moment of distraction, Ryan and I ran. We sprinted up the slope away from the facility, not daring to look back until we'd crested the ridge. When we finally turned around, the entire complex was engulfed in flames. Secondary explosions were going off every few seconds, sending debris high into the air. What the hell? Ryan gasped. That's when we saw him, a lone figure silhouetted against the flames, walking away from the burning facility. Even at a distance, I could tell he was moving normally. Not with that inhuman grace, but with the stumbling, exhausted gait of an ordinary human being. Hey, I called out. Over here. The figure looked up and changed direction toward us. As he got closer, I could see it was a man in his 50s, wearing a torn and dirty military uniform. His face was haggard, his eyes haunted, but definitely human. Thank God, he said when he reached us. I thought I was the only one left. Who are you? Ryan asked. Colonel James Mitchell, U.S. Army Special Operations. He collapsed to his knees, exhaustion finally overtaking him. I've been fighting those things for 3 days. Fighting them? Mitchell nodded toward the burning facility. That was a containment site. Been operational for maybe 6 months, ever since we first detected their presence in this region. We were studying them, trying to understand what they were and how to stop them. We? I asked. My team. 12 men, all dead now. Mitchell's voice was hollow. The things got to them one by one. Took their faces, their voices, their memories. I only escaped because I happened to be outside the perimeter when they breached containment. How many of them are there? We estimated maybe 50 in this area. But that's just the beginning. Mitchell struggled to his feet. They're spreading. Every person they take becomes one of them. The infection rate is exponential. Infection? That's what we called it. Some kind of parasitic consciousness that can inhabit and control human bodies. We don't know where they came from originally. Deep space, parallel dimensions, somewhere else entirely. But we know how they operate. Mitchell pulled a small device from his pocket that looked like a modified GPS unit. They emit a specific electromagnetic signature when they're active. This scanner can detect them from up to a mile away. He turned it on, and the screen immediately lit up with dozens of red dots. Jesus Christ, Ryan breathed. There's so many of them. And they're all heading in the same direction, Mitchell observed, studying the display, back toward populated areas. The dots were moving in a coordinated pattern, streaming away from the burning facility and toward what I assumed was the main highway. They were going to spread into the cities, taking over more and more people until... How do we stop them? I asked. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. I don't know if we can. he admitted finally. My team had some theories, but we never got a chance to test them. He looked up at us. The best we can do is warn people. Get word out to the authorities, the military, anyone who'll listen. Will they believe us? Would you have believed it 3 days ago? He had a point. But I thought about Derek and Jake, about the thing wearing their faces, and I knew we had to try. Even if it meant spending the rest of our lives labeled as crazy conspiracy theorists, we had to warn people about what was coming. There's a ranger station about 10 miles south of here, Mitchell said. If it's still operational, they'll have radio equipment. We can try to contact the outside world from there. We started walking, using Mitchell's scanner to avoid the moving red dots. The device showed creatures all around us, streaming through the forest in groups of 2 or 3. But they seemed focused on getting out of the wilderness quickly, not on hunting us down. Why aren't they coming after us? Ryan asked. Priorities, Mitchell replied. 3 humans in the middle of nowhere versus thousands of potential hosts in populated areas. They're thinking strategically now. The idea of those things thinking strategically was terrifying. Bad enough when they were just mimicking our dead friends. But if they could plan, coordinate, work together, we reached the ranger station just as dawn was breaking. It was a small log building with a radio tower, exactly the kind of remote outpost you'd expect to find in the middle of the Wyoming wilderness. But the windows were dark, and no smoke rose from the chimney. Mitchell checked his scanner. 1 red dot, stationary inside the building. Someone's in there, he whispered, but they're infected. We circled the building carefully, looking for another way in or some indication of what we might be facing. Through a back window, I could see a figure sitting at a desk with its back to us. It wasn't moving at all, just sitting perfectly still in a way that no living human could manage. What's it doing? Ryan asked. Waiting, Mitchell said grimly. They know we need the radio. This is a trap. But we didn't have a choice. Without communication equipment, we'd never be able to warn anyone about what was happening. We'd just be 3 more victims lost in the wilderness while the infection spread unchecked. There might be weapons inside, Mitchell said. Standard ranger stations usually have a gun locker. Do guns work on them? Destroy the brain, the body stops functioning. They're not supernatural, just parasites using human neural networks as hardware. Mitchell found a window that was slightly open and managed to pry it wider. He climbed through first, moving with the practiced stealth of someone with military training. Ryan and I followed, trying to be as quiet as possible. The interior of the ranger station was exactly what you'd expect. Rustic furniture, maps on the walls, the smell of old coffee and pine logs. And sitting at the radio desk, perfectly motionless, was a park ranger. Mitchell signaled for us to wait while he approached the figure from behind. When he was close enough, he grabbed a heavy flashlight from a nearby shelf and brought it down hard on the back of the ranger's head. The impact made a wet, crunching sound. The ranger's head snapped forward, then rolled to one side at an unnatural angle. But the thing didn't fall over. Instead, it slowly turned around to face us. Its head still tilted at that impossible angle, and smiled. "Colonel Mitchell," it said in a perfectly normal ranger's voice. "We've been expecting you." Mitchell hit it again, and this time the skull caved in completely. The thing finally stopped moving, collapsing forward onto the radio equipment. "Shit," Mitchell muttered, pushing the body aside. "I hope it didn't damage the radio." But when he tried to turn on the equipment, nothing happened. The thing had been sitting there for hours, probably since sometime yesterday, and had managed to disable the radio without visibly damaging it. "Now what?" Ryan asked. Mitchell was already moving toward a locked cabinet on the far wall. "Gun locker," he explained, pulling a small device from his pocket that looked like a sophisticated lockpick. Military-issued weapons, probably including some kind of rifle. The lock clicked open, revealing 3 hunting rifles and several boxes of ammunition. Mitchell grabbed one of the rifles and tossed another to me. "You know how to use that?" he asked. I nodded. My father had taken me hunting a few times when I was younger. I wasn't an expert, but I knew which end the bullet came out of. "Good, because we're going to need all the firepower we can get. What's the plan?" Mitchell shouldered his rifle and checked his scanner. "We hike back to the highway, find a vehicle, drive to the nearest town and hope the phone lines are still working." And if the town's already infected, then we keep driving until we find one that isn't. But as we prepared to leave the ranger station, Mitchell's scanner began beeping rapidly. The display showed dozens of red dots converging on our location from all directions. "They found us," he said quietly. Through the windows I could see figures moving between the trees. They emerged from the forest in groups of 2 and 3, all wearing different faces but moving with that same unnatural coordination. Derek was among them, still in Officer Patterson's uniform. So was Jake, now dressed in the gray coveralls we'd seen at the facility. And there were others. The woman from the car, the real Patterson, the ranger whose body lay at our feet, a growing collection of stolen identities, all under the control of something alien and hungry. 57 contacts, Mitchell read from his scanner. They brought everyone. We were surrounded and outnumbered. 3 humans with hunting rifles against nearly 60 of those things. It should have been hopeless. But Mitchell was smiling grimly. Good thing I saved one last surprise. He pulled a small device from his jacket that looked like a military radio, but with extra antennas and blinking lights. Emergency beacon, he explained. Encrypted military frequency. I activated it when we first got here. You called for backup? I called for an airstrike. Through the windows, the possessed humans were forming a circle around the ranger station, just like they had at the facility. But this time, they weren't rushing us. They just stood there, waiting. "Why aren't they attacking?" Ryan whispered. Mitchell checked his watch. "Because they know about the beacon. They're hoping to break us psychologically before the strike arrives." Derek's voice called out from the circle of watchers. "Colonel Mitchell, let's talk." Mitchell ignored him, but Derek continued anyway. "We know what you're planning. The airstrike will arrive in approximately 12 minutes, but it won't stop us. There are thousands of us now, spread across 6 states. You can destroy this group, but the others will continue the integration process." "Integration," Mitchell muttered. "They make it sound like a fucking software update." Jake's voice joined Derek's. "Marcus, Ryan, you don't have to die with him. We can offer you something better than death." "Don't listen," Mitchell warned. "They're trying to get inside your heads." But it was hard not to listen when the voices belonged to our dead friends. Even knowing what we knew, seeing what we'd seen, there was still a part of me that wanted to believe Derek and Jake were really in there somewhere. "We remember everything about you," Derek called out. "Your hopes, your fears, your dreams. We can give you everything you ever wanted. No more pain, no more loneliness, no more death." "Sounds pretty good, actually," Ryan said quietly, and I realized with horror that he was seriously considering it. "Ryan, no," I said. "That's not Derek out there. Derek is dead." "Is he, though?" Ryan stared out the window at our friend's familiar face. What if they're telling the truth? What if Derek really is still alive in there, just changed? Mitchell grabbed Ryan's shoulder. "Listen to me. Those things are parasites. They consume consciousness and wear it like a costume. Your friend isn't changed. He's been eaten." But doubt was creeping into Ryan's voice. "How do you know? Have you ever been integrated? Have you ever experienced what they're describing?" "Ryan," Jake's voice called from outside as if the thing wearing his face could hear our conversation. "I know you're scared, but I'm still me. I'm still your friend. I just understand things better now." And that's when I realized what was happening. The psychological attack Mitchell had mentioned wasn't about breaking us down through fear. It was about offering us something we desperately wanted to believe, that our friends weren't really gone. "It's true," Ryan whispered, moving toward the door. "I can see it in their eyes. They're still in there." I tackled Ryan before he could reach the door, knocking him to the floor. He fought me, but he was still weakened from our ordeal in the forest, and I managed to pin him down. "They're not our friends," I said desperately. "Look at them. Really look." Through the window, Derek and Jake stood with absolute stillness, their faces showing identical expressions of patient hunger. They looked like our friends, but they moved like predators wearing familiar masks. Ryan stopped struggling. "Oh, God," he breathed. "What was I thinking?" "They were in your head," Mitchell said grimly. "That's how they work. They find what you want most and promise it to you." A new sound reached us from outside. the distant whine of jet engines growing louder by the second. 2 minutes, Mitchell announced, checking his watch. The circle of possessed humans began moving closer to the ranger station, their synchronized movement even more unsettling than before. They knew what was coming, but they weren't running. If anything, they seemed eager to get as close as possible before the strike arrived. "Why aren't they retreating?" I asked. Mitchell's face went pale. "Because they don't need these bodies to survive. They're going to sacrifice this group to take us with them." The jet engines were directly overhead now, a screaming roar that shook the small building. Through the windows I could see the possessed humans beginning to run. Not away from the ranger station, but toward it. "Basement!" Mitchell shouted. "Now!" We found a trapdoor behind the radio desk and threw it open, revealing a small cellar that probably served as a storm shelter. The three of us piled down the wooden ladder just as the first body hit the door upstairs. The basement was cramped and dark, filled with emergency supplies and the smell of damp earth. Above us, we could hear footsteps moving through the ranger station, searching for us. Then, Derek's voice, impossibly calm, "We know you're down there. Come up and make this easy on everyone." The jet engines were fading into the distance, but I knew the missiles were already on their way. 60 seconds, maybe less. Something heavy began pounding on the trapdoor above us, trying to break through. Wood splintered and cracked, and I could see fingers, too many fingers, reaching through the gaps. Mitchell raised his rifle and fired 3 shots through the trapdoor. The pounding stopped, but only for a moment. Then it resumed, even more violent than before. "How long?" Ryan asked. Mitchell looked at his watch. 30 seconds. The trapdoor exploded inward, raining splinters and debris down on us. Jake's face appeared in the opening, grinning that impossibly wide grin, his neck twisted at an angle that should have been fatal. "Found you," he said in Jake's voice. More faces crowded around the opening. Derek, Patterson, the ranger, the woman from the car, all of them smiling. All of them reaching down toward us with those elongated fingers. 10 seconds, Mitchell whispered. Jake dropped through the opening, landing in the basement with cat-like grace despite his obviously broken neck. The others followed, filling the small space with stolen faces and hungry eyes. 5. Derek's hand closed around my throat, lifting me off the ground with impossible strength. I could see my own terror reflected in his familiar features. 3. Jake grabbed Ryan, pulling him close in what might have been an embrace if not for the sound of bones breaking. 2. Mitchell's finger tightened on his rifle trigger. 1. The world ended. The explosion was beyond anything I could have imagined. A roar that seemed to come from inside my own skull, heat that turned the air itself into fire, pressure that felt like being squeezed by an enormous fist. The ranger station vanished in an instant, along with the forest around it. The basement filled with debris and flame and something that might have been the screams of dying things. Then, darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later. The official story, as told to me by a succession of doctors, nurses, and federal agents, was that there had been a gas leak explosion at an old mining facility in the Bighorn Mountains. 3 survivors had been found in what remained of a ranger station basement, all suffering from severe smoke inhalation and various injuries. Derek Thompson and Jake Morrison were listed as missing, presumed dead in the explosion. Their bodies were never recovered. The federal agents were very interested in my version of events. They asked detailed questions about what we'd seen, what we'd experienced, what we remembered about the days leading up to the explosion. When I told them about the creatures, the possession, the facility, they nodded and took notes without any visible skepticism. "There have been other incidents," one of them finally admitted. "Similar reports from remote areas across several states. We're investigating." "Are they real?" I asked. "The things we saw?" The agent exchanged glances with his partner. "Mr. Davis, what you experienced was undoubtedly traumatic. It's not uncommon for trauma victims to have vivid hallucinations, false memories, or... It wasn't a hallucination." "No," the agent said quietly. "I don't think it was." Ryan was in the bed next to mine, recovering from 3 broken ribs and a collapsed lung. He remembered everything too, though he'd been advised by his own set of federal visitors to keep those memories to himself. For national security reasons, he told me when the agents finally left us alone. Mitchell had been transferred to a military hospital the day before. I never saw him again, though Ryan thought he'd glimpsed him being wheeled out of the building under heavy security. We were released after a week of observation and debriefing. Both of us signed documents promising never to discuss the events in the Bighorn Mountains with anyone outside of official channels. Violation of these agreements would result in prosecution under various federal laws I'd never heard of. But I'm violating that agreement now by telling this story, because what happened to us in those mountains was real, and people need to know about it. The things are still out there. I see the signs sometimes. News reports about people who disappear for days and return changed. Missing persons cases that get quietly closed without explanation. Small towns that go silent for a few days, then suddenly everything's back to normal. I think about Derek and Jake often, about the way they smiled when they weren't themselves anymore, about the thing wearing Derek's face that promised eternal life without pain or fear or death. Sometimes, in my darker moments, I wonder if they were right, if what they offered really was better than this existence of constant fear and uncertainty. But then I remember the hunger in their eyes, the wrongness of their movements, the way they spoke about humans like we were food to be consumed. And I know that whatever those things were offering, it wasn't life. It was something else entirely, something that wore life's face but had none of its warmth. The nightmares still come, dreams where Derek and Jake visit me, smiling those two wide smiles, promising that it's not too late to join them, that they're still my friends, just changed, just evolved into something better. I wake up screaming sometimes, but I wake up as myself, and for now, that has to be enough, because the alternative is becoming something that looks like me, but isn't me anymore. Something that would wear my face and speak with my voice while hunting down everyone I've ever cared about. And I'd rather die as myself than live as one of them. Even if they are still out there, waiting in the dark places of the world. Even if they're spreading, taking more and more people every day. Even if someday they'll come for me too. I'll face that when it happens. But I'll face it as Marcus Davis, not as something wearing his face. That's all any of us can do, I think. Stay human, stay ourselves, and hope it's enough. The things in the mountains offered us eternity. But some prices are too high to pay, no matter what you get in return. I hope I'm strong enough to remember that if they ever come back for me. I hope we all are. I never believed in the stories they told about Hocking Hills until what happened to me out there. My name is Dylan Foster. I'm 28 years old, and what I lived through during that weekend still wakes me up at night. It was October when Aria and I decided to take our first RV trip together. We'd been dating for 2 years, and she'd been dropping hints about wanting to get away from everything for months. The rental place in Columbus had this pristine 32-foot Winnebago that seemed perfect. Kitchen, bathroom, queen bed in the back. All the comforts of home while we explored the caves and waterfalls of Hocking Hills State Park. Aria Charlotte was everything I wasn't. Spontaneous where I planned, fearless where I worried. Alive in ways that made me feel more human just by being near her. Her dark hair caught light like water, and she had this laugh that could make strangers smile from across a room. She worked as a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital, spending her days with kids who adored her. Everyone did. "It'll be perfect, Dylan," she'd said, spreading maps across our kitchen table. Just us, the woods, and no cell service for 3 whole days. She traced the hiking trails with her finger, her green eyes bright with excitement. "When's the last time we really talked? I mean, without Netflix or phones or work interrupting?" I'd agreed because I loved her, but also because something in her voice seemed desperate. She'd been working double shifts lately, coming home pale and exhausted, waking up from nightmares she wouldn't discuss. I thought the trip might help whatever was eating at her. We left Friday afternoon, the Winnebago handling better than I'd expected as we wound through the rolling hills of southeastern Ohio. October had painted the hardwood forests in brilliant reds and golds, and Aria pressed her face to the passenger window like a child, pointing out deer and hawks. For the first time in weeks, she seemed genuinely happy. "Look at that," she breathed as we crested a hill and saw the forest spread below us like a living carpet. "It's so endless." Hocking Hills had always been popular with campers, but we'd booked a spot at a smaller, more remote campground called Whispering Pines, about 15 miles from the main state park. The owner, a weathered man named Earl, had promised solitude and the real woods experience. As we turned onto the narrow gravel road that led to our site, I was starting to understand what he meant. The trees pressed close on both sides, their branches forming a tunnel overhead that filtered the late afternoon sun into scattered golden coins. The road twisted and turned, never letting us see more than 50 feet ahead. More than once I had to stop for deer that seemed oddly unafraid of the RV, staring at us with dark, liquid eyes before slowly stepping aside. "This is creepy as hell," I muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter as we navigated another sharp turn. "It's beautiful," Arya corrected, but her voice had a strange quality to it, almost dreamy. "So quiet, so hungry." I glanced at her. "Hungry?" She blinked as if coming back from somewhere far away. "What?" "No," I said, "empty. So empty." But I could have sworn she'd said hungry. Our campsite was a small clearing surrounded by towering oaks and maples, their trunks so thick that 3 people holding hands couldn't have circled them. A fire pit sat in the center, ringed by stones that looked older than they should have. The whole place felt ancient, untouched, as if we were the first humans to ever set foot there. "This is it," Arya whispered, stepping out of the RV and turning slowly, arms spread wide. "This is perfect." I couldn't shake the feeling that the trees were watching us. Setting up took longer than expected. The RV's leveling jacks kept slipping on the soft ground, and our water hookup seemed to have issues. The flow would stop and start randomly, sometimes spurting brown water that smelled of sulfur and decay. By the time we had everything working, the sun was setting behind the trees, casting long shadows across our clearing. "Let's get a fire going," I suggested, but when I tried to light the kindling we'd brought, the matches kept going out. Even when I cupped my hands around them, protected from any breeze, the flames would flicker and die as if something was sucking the oxygen away. "Here, let me try." Arya knelt beside the fire pit, and on her first try the kindling caught. But the flames burned wrong, too blue around the edges, and they made no sound at all. Even when I added larger pieces of wood, the fire remained eerily silent. We cooked dinner on the RV's stove instead, sitting at the small dinette while darkness gathered outside the windows. The campground had no other guests, and without the distant hum of traffic or neighbors, the silence felt oppressive. Every few minutes we'd hear something moving in the woods, the snap of a branch, the rustle of leaves. But whenever I looked out, there was nothing there. "Are you okay?" I asked Arya as we cleaned up. She'd been quiet during dinner, barely touching her food, her eyes constantly drifting to the windows. "Just tired," she said, but her voice sounded far away. "It's so peaceful here. I feel like I could just disappear into it." That first night, I woke to the sound of whispers. They were coming from outside the RV, soft and sibilant, like wind through leaves, but the air was still. I checked my phone, 3:06 a.m. Arya was sleeping beside me, her breathing deep and regular, so I slipped out of bed and crept to the front of the RV. Peering through the windshield, I could see our clearing bathed in moonlight. The fire had died to embers, casting a faint red glow over the circle of stones. At first, everything looked normal. Then I saw them, shadows moving between the trees, tall and thin, swaying slightly as if dancing to music only they could hear. I blinked hard, sure I was seeing things, but the shadows remained. There had to be a dozen of them, just beyond the edge of our clearing, and as I watched, one detached itself from a massive oak and glided closer to the RV. It had no features I could make out, just a vaguely human shape made of darkness. But as it approached our front door, I could swear I heard my name being whispered. "Dylan. Dylan." My blood turned to ice water. The shadow reached the RV and seemed to press against the door, its form rippling like smoke. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Dylan, come out. Come play." I stumbled backward, my heart hammering, and bumped into the dinette table. When I looked up, the shadows were gone. The clearing stood empty in the moonlight, peaceful and still. Bad dream? I spun around to find Arya standing in the doorway to the bedroom, her hair messy from sleep. But something was wrong with her eyes. They seemed to reflect the moonlight like an animal's. Yeah, just a bad dream. I didn't want to worry her, especially since I was starting to doubt what I'd seen myself. She smiled and patted over to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. Her skin was cold, much colder than it should have been after sleeping under blankets. Poor baby. Come back to bed. As we walked back to the bedroom, I could have sworn I heard soft laughter coming from the woods. Saturday morning dawned gray and overcast, with a thick fog hanging in the trees that made everything beyond our clearing invisible. Arya seemed more like herself, chattering about the hiking trails we'd planned to explore, but I noticed she kept glancing toward the woods with an expression I couldn't read. "Let's skip the trails today," I suggested as we made coffee. "Maybe just relax here, read, enjoy the quiet." "No." Her voice was sharp, almost harsh. "I want to see the caves. The deep ones, where no one goes." Then her expression softened, and she laughed. "Sorry, I just really want to explore. We came all this way." The nearest trailhead was supposed to be a mile down the main road, but when we climbed into the RV and tried to retrace our route, we couldn't find it. The road seemed different somehow. Curves where there had been straight stretches, hills where the terrain had been flat. My GPS showed us as a blue dot in the middle of blank space, no roads or landmarks marked. "That's weird," I muttered, pulling over to check the paper map. But according to the map, we were exactly where we were supposed to be. The trail should have been right in front of us. "There." Arya pointed to a gap in the trees I hadn't noticed before. "That looks like a trail." It did look like a trail, though it wasn't marked and seemed barely wide enough for one person. The path disappeared into the fog after just a few yards, but Arya was already getting out of the RV. "Are you sure about this?" I called after her. "Maybe we should go back to the campground office, ask Earl about the marked trails." "Don't be such a worrier," she called back, her voice already growing distant. "It's an adventure." I grabbed our day pack and hurried after her, but the moment I stepped onto the trail, the fog seemed to thicken around us. Within minutes, I could barely see Arya 5 feet ahead of me. The path wound through the trees in a way that felt wrong, doubling back on itself, leading us over the same fallen log 3 or 4 times. "Arya, I think we're going in circles." "No, we're not." Her voice had that dreamy quality again. "We're going exactly where we need to go." The fog began to thin as we climbed, and suddenly we emerged onto a rocky ledge overlooking a deep ravine. Far below, I could see a creek winding between massive boulders, and beyond that, a dark opening in the cliff face that could only be a cave. "There," Arya breathed, pointing at the cave mouth. "That's where we need to go." "Arya, that has to be a 100-foot drop. There's no way down." But she was already moving, following the ledge around the rim of the ravine. I had no choice but to follow, my heart pounding every time loose rocks skittered over the edge. The path she was taking seemed impossible. Too narrow, too dangerous, but somehow we made it to the bottom without falling. The cave mouth yawned before us, easily 20 feet tall and twice as wide. Cold air flowed out of it, carrying a smell like old bones and wet earth. In the distance, I could hear the sound of running water, but underneath that was something else. A low humming, almost musical. "We can't go in there without lights," I protested, but Arya was already walking into the darkness. "Arya, stop!" My voice echoed strangely in the cave mouth, coming back to me distorted, as if the walls were changing the words. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight and hurried after her, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. The cave was massive, with passages branching off in all directions. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like teeth, and the floor was slick with moisture that made our footsteps echo wetly. Arya moved ahead of me with sure steps, as if she knew exactly where she was going. "How do you know which way to go?" I called after her. "I can hear it calling," she said without turning around. "Can't you hear it?" I could hear the humming growing louder as we went deeper. And now there was something else. Whispers, just like the ones from the night before. They seemed to be coming from the walls themselves, speaking in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood. They were welcoming us, inviting us deeper. The passage opened into a vast underground chamber, and my flashlight beam was swallowed by the darkness above us. In the center of the space was a pool of black water, perfectly still, reflecting our lights like a mirror. Around the edges of the pool, the stone had been carved with symbols, spirals and geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. "It's beautiful," Arya whispered, kneeling beside the water. "So peaceful. Arya, we should go. This place gives me the creeps." She looked up at me, and for a moment, I didn't recognize her at all. Her eyes were completely black, no white showing, and her smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. "Don't you want to see what's down there?" she asked, her voice echoing strangely off the water. Then she blinked, and she was normal again. "Dylan, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I was probably hallucinating from the stress and the weird acoustics of the cave. "Nothing. Just, let's head back. It's getting late." The return trip took forever. Every passage looked the same, and more than once I was sure we were lost. My phone had no signal, of course, and the compass app spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. But Arya led us out as confidently as she'd let us in, emerging into daylight just as the sun was setting. By the time we got back to the campground, full darkness had fallen. Our fire pit was blazing with a roaring fire, though neither of us had lit it. The flames leaped 6 feet into the air, casting wild shadows that seemed to dance independently of the light. Did Earl come by? I wondered aloud, but there were no other vehicles, no footprints around our site except our own. "Maybe it was our guardian angel," Arya said, laughing. But her laugh sounded different, hollow, like an echo of itself. That night, I dreamed I was back in the cave, standing beside the black pool. But this time, I was alone. The whispers were louder, more insistent, and they were speaking English now. She belongs to us now. She invited us in. "Soon, you will too." I tried to run, but the passages twisted around me, leading me in circles, always bringing me back to the pool. And floating just beneath the surface of the black water was Arya's face, pale and serene, her eyes open but unseeing. I woke with a gasp to find the other side of the bed empty. "Arya," I called out but got no response. I checked the bathroom, the kitchen, even the outside storage compartments, but she was nowhere to be found. The RV door was standing open, cold night air pouring in. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The fire was still burning, impossibly high, and in its light I could see footprints leading from the RV to the edge of our clearing. Arya's footprints, but something was wrong with them. They were too deep, as if she'd gained 100 pounds overnight, and spaced too far apart as if her legs had grown longer. "Arya!" I shouted into the woods. From somewhere in the darkness came a sound that might have been laughter, or might have been screaming. I followed the footprints into the trees, my flashlight beam dancing wildly as branches caught at my clothes and roots tried to trip me. The prints led me in a winding path through the forest, sometimes disappearing entirely on rocky ground, sometimes doubling back on themselves. After what felt like hours but could only have been minutes, I found myself back in our clearing. The fire had died to normal size, and Arya was sitting on one of the camp chairs, staring into the flames. "There you are," she said without looking up. "I was wondering when you'd get back." "Where were you?" "I've been looking everywhere." "I went for a walk. Couldn't sleep." She turned to smile at me, and in the firelight her teeth looked sharp. "I feel so much better now." "Arya, you've been gone for hours. I followed your footprints, but they just led me in circles. That's impossible. I only left a few minutes ago." She stood and stretched, her movements somehow wrong, too fluid. "Come on, let's get some sleep. Big day tomorrow." But I noticed she didn't walk toward the RV. She glided, her feet barely seeming to touch the ground. Sunday morning brought no relief. I woke to find Arya sitting at the dinette, staring out the window with that blank expression she'd been wearing more and more often. Our food had spoiled overnight. The milk had curdled, the bread was covered in blue-green mold, and the eggs had turned black inside their shells. "We need to leave," I told her. "Something's wrong with this place." "Nothing's wrong," she said calmly. "Everything's perfect. Our food rotted, Arya. That doesn't just happen. Food spoils. That's what food does." She turned to look at me, and her eyes were completely flat like a doll's. "You're being paranoid." I tried to start the RV, but the engine wouldn't turn over. The battery was dead, though it had been fine the day before. When I popped the hood, I found that someone, or something, had chewed through several of the wires. The bite marks were too big to be from any animal I knew. "We're walking out," I decided. "It's only 15 miles to town." "I'm not leaving," Arya said. Her voice had taken on that hollow quality again. "I like it here. I want to stay forever." "Arya, please, you're not acting like yourself." "I'm acting like myself for the first time in years." She smiled, and this time I was certain her teeth were longer than they should have been. "Don't you want to stay with me, Dylan? Don't you love me?" The way she said my name made my skin crawl. It was Arya's voice, but there was something underneath it. Something cold and hungry and ancient. "Of course I love you, but—" "Then stay." She reached for me, and when her fingers touched my arm, they were ice cold. "Stay and be with me forever." I pulled away and backed toward the door. "I'm going to get help. I'll be back with a mechanic, get the RV running." "You won't leave me." It wasn't a request. "I won't let you leave me." I ran. The gravel road that had brought us in was gone. In its place was a barely visible deer path that wound through trees so thick their branches blocked out the sky. I ran until my lungs burned, following what I hoped was the right direction, but every turn brought me to places I didn't recognize. After an hour of running, I found myself back at our clearing. Arya was sitting by the fire pit, exactly as I'd left her. She looked up when I crashed through the trees, gasping and sweating. "That was quick," she said pleasantly. "Did you have a nice walk?" "The road's gone," I panted. "It's just gone." "Roads don't just disappear, Dylan." She tilted her head, studying me like I was an interesting specimen. "Maybe you got turned around." I followed it exactly. "The road we came in on doesn't exist anymore." "Then how did we get here?" It was a reasonable question, and I had no answer for it. Had there ever been a road? The memory felt hazy, unreliable, like trying to remember a dream after waking. "I'm calling for help." I pulled out my phone, but the screen showed no signal, no GPS, no indication that we were anywhere on Earth at all. "Who are you going to call?" Arya asked. "And what are you going to tell them?" She had a point. What would I say? That my girlfriend was acting strange and a road had disappeared? That I was lost in a forest that somehow kept leading me back to the same clearing? "I'm going to try again," I said. "There has to be a way out." "There is." Arya stood and walked over to me, moving with that eerie glide. "But not the way you're thinking." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, she kissed me. Her lips were cold as winter stone, and when she pulled away, I could taste something metallic in my mouth. Blood, I realized. My blood. "I'm hungry, Dylan," she whispered, her breath like ice against my ear. "So very hungry. And you look delicious." That's when I knew for certain that whatever was standing in front of me, it wasn't Arya anymore. I shoved her away and ran for the woods again, crashing through undergrowth, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. Behind me, I could hear laughter that echoed strangely, seeming to come from everywhere at once. This time, I was more careful about direction, using the position of the sun to guide me, making marks on trees to ensure I wasn't going in circles. But it didn't matter. Every path led back to the clearing. Every direction brought me home to the thing that wore Arya's face. She was waiting for me, patient as death. "You can't leave," she explained as if teaching a slow child. "This place won't let you. It wants you to stay. It wants both of us to stay." "What happened to Arya?" I demanded. "Where is she?" "I'm right here, baby," but the smile she gave me belonged on the face of a predator. "I'm more me than I've ever been. You're not her. I'm exactly her. Every memory, every feeling, every little thing she loved about you." The thing that looked like Arya circled me slowly, never taking its eyes off mine. I know how she felt when you first kissed her. I know how she worried about whether you'd propose. I know how disappointed she was when you didn't. That hit me like a physical blow. Arya had been dropping hints about marriage for months, but I'd been waiting for the right time, the right moment. I'd even bought a ring, hidden in my sock drawer back home. I know everything she knew, the creature continued, but I also know so much more. I know what it's like to be hungry all the time. I know what it's like to need. What do you need? You. It smiled, and this time I could see that its teeth had definitely changed, becoming longer and sharper. I need you to stay with me. I need you to let me in, the way she did. Arya wouldn't have let something like you in. Oh, but she did. She stood by that black pool and she wished so hard to be free of her pain. All those children at the hospital who didn't make it, all those families she couldn't save, it was eating her alive. She wished she could be someone else, something that couldn't feel that kind of hurt anymore. It was true. Arya had been struggling with work, losing patients she'd grown attached to, coming home in tears more and more often. I'd suggested she talk to someone, maybe take some time off, but she'd insisted she was fine. And I answered, the creature said softly. I gave her what she wanted. No more pain. No more guilt. No more of those terrible dreams about tiny coffins and grieving parents. You killed her. I liberated her. It reached for me again, and this time I was too tired to pull away. Its touch was like ice water in my veins. I can do the same for you. All that worry, all that fear, all those sleepless nights wondering if you're good enough, smart enough, successful enough. I can take all of that away. For a moment, I was tempted. The constant anxiety that had been my companion since childhood, the imposter syndrome that made me feel like a fraud at my job, the crushing weight of adult responsibilities. What would it be like to be free of all that? What's the price? I asked. No price, it whispered, leaning closer. Just let me in. Let me take away everything that hurts. And then what? I become like you? You become free. Its eyes were completely black now, like staring into deep water. Free to do whatever feels good. Free to take whatever you want. Free to feed. Feed on what? It smiled, and I saw my own face reflected in its dark eyes. Whatever we find. The thing that had been Arya was inches from my face now, its cold breath fogging in the air between us. I could smell something rotten underneath the familiar scent of her perfume, like flowers growing in a graveyard. Just say yes, Dylan. Just say yes, and all the pain stops forever. I almost did it. God help me. I almost said yes. Instead, I grabbed a burning branch from the fire pit and drove it into its chest. The creature screamed, a sound like metal tearing, and stumbled backward. Where the flames touched its skin, the flesh bubbled and blackened, and underneath I could see something writhing, something that definitely wasn't human. That wasn't very nice, it snarled, its voice dropping to registers that made my teeth ache. The burned area began to heal almost immediately, the skin knitting itself back together. But for just a moment, I'd seen what was really underneath Arya's form, something pale and twisted, with too many joints and fingers that bent the wrong way. I ran toward the RV, hoping to barricade myself inside, but the creature was faster. It flowed around me like smoke, cutting off my escape, and when it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. You can't hide from me. You can't run from me. I know everything she knew, including how much she loved you. Do you really want to hurt someone who loves you that much? It was using Arya's voice now, soft and pleading, exactly the way she sounded when she was trying to talk me into doing something I didn't want to do. Please, Dylan, I'm scared. Something's wrong with me and I don't know what's happening. For a second, hope flared in my chest. Maybe Arya was still in there somewhere, fighting to get out. Maybe I could save her. Then I saw its shadow in the firelight, and it didn't look human at all. You're not her, I said, gripping the burning branch tighter. I am her, it shrieked, the mask slipping again. I'm everything she was and more. I'm what she wanted to become. Arya would never hurt me. Wouldn't she? It tilted its head at an angle no human neck could manage. She hurt you every time she stayed late at work. She hurt you every time she chose those dying children over spending time with you. She hurt you every time she pulled away when you tried to touch her, too exhausted and depressed to be the girlfriend you wanted. Every word was like a knife, because every word was true. Our relationship had been struggling. Arya had been distant, distracted, coming home too tired to talk or make love or do any of the things we used to enjoy together. I'd been patient, understanding, but part of me had been growing resentful. She was going through a rough patch, I said weakly. She was broken, the creature corrected. Damaged beyond repair, but I fixed her. I made her whole again. I made her perfect for you. By turning her into a monster. By turning her into what she always wanted to be. Someone who couldn't be hurt. It smiled Arya's beautiful smile. And now I want to give you the same gift. The creature lunged at me, moving faster than thought, and I barely got the burning branch up in time to ward it off. The flames seared across its face, and for an instant I saw its true form. Something like a praying mantis crossed with a spider, all sharp angles and chitinous plates, with too many eyes that reflected the firelight like black jewels. Then it was Arya again, clutching its burned cheek, tears streaming down its face. "Why won't you let me help you?" It sobbed, and the pain in its voice sounded so real, so much like my Arya, that I almost dropped the torch. That's when I remembered the ring. It was in my jacket pocket. I'd brought it on the trip, planning to propose at one of the scenic overlooks. If this thing really had all of Arya's memories, then it would know about the ring, would know how important it was. "If you're really Arya," I said, backing slowly toward the RV, "then you'll know why I brought you here." The creature stopped crying, its head tilting with predatory interest. "To get away. To have some time together. That's not the only reason." It studied my face, and I tried to keep my expression neutral. After a long moment, it smiled. "You brought a ring," it said, and its voice was filled with such joy and excitement that I almost believed it was really her. "You were going to propose." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small velvet box, holding it up so the creature could see. Its eyes, Arya's green eyes, locked onto the ring with an expression of such hunger that I knew I'd guessed right. "If you're really Arya, if you really love me, then this will mean everything to you." "It does," the creature breathed, taking a step toward me. "Oh, Dylan, it does. Then you'll understand why I have to do this." I threw the ring as hard as I could into the woods. The creature's scream of rage shattered the night air, and this time it didn't sound human at all. It spun toward where the ring had disappeared, its form already beginning to shift and change, becoming something with too many arms and legs that could move through the trees with impossible speed. While it searched frantically for the ring, I ran to the RV and slammed the door behind me, turning every lock I could find. The aluminum walls wouldn't keep it out for long, but maybe long enough. I tried the engine one more time, and to my amazement, it turned over. The headlights blazed to life, illuminating our clearing, and there in the trees I could see it. The creature's true form, all insectoid angles and grasping claws, digging through the undergrowth with desperate fury. I put the RV in drive and floored it. There was no road, but I didn't care anymore. I crashed through saplings and underbrush, the RV bouncing and shuddering as I drove in what I hoped was the right direction. Behind me, I could hear the creature screaming, a sound like breaking glass and tearing metal. I drove for what felt like hours, the headlights cutting through the darkness, tree branches scraping against the windshield. More than once, I was sure I was going to get stuck or tip over, but somehow the RV kept moving. Then, impossibly, I found asphalt. The state highway stretched ahead of me in both directions, empty and welcoming. I pulled onto it with a sob of relief and drove toward the distant glow of town lights, not slowing down until I saw the first gas station. The police listened to my story with the patient expressions they reserved for drunks and crazy people. A search team found our campground the next day, or at least they found a campground. But it wasn't the one where we'd stayed. The fire pit was in the wrong place, and there was no sign that anyone had camped there recently. They never found any trace of Arya. The official report listed her as missing, presumed dead, possibly taken by a bear or wild animal. There were no leads, no clues, no evidence of foul play, just another tragic accident in the wilderness. I tried to move on. I went to therapy, took medication for the nightmares, even started dating again after a year. But I can't shake the feeling that something followed me home from those woods. Sometimes, late at night, I hear whispers outside my apartment. Sometimes I catch movement in my peripheral vision, but when I turn, there's nothing there. And sometimes when I'm not thinking about it, when my guard is down, I hear Arya's voice calling my name. She sounds hungry. I've moved 3 times in the past 2 years, but it doesn't help. Whatever that thing was, whatever it did to her, I think it marked me somehow. I think it's still waiting for me to say yes, to stop fighting, to let it in. And the worst part is, some nights when the loneliness gets too heavy and the memories of what we used to have together are too painful to bear, I'm tempted to do exactly that. After all, what would be so wrong with not feeling this pain anymore? What would be so wrong with being free? The ring is still out there, somewhere in those woods. Sometimes I think about going back to look for it, even though I know that's exactly what it wants me to do. I never will, though. I'm stronger than that. At least, I think I am. But on nights like tonight, when the whispers are louder and Arya's voice sounds so real, so close, I'm not entirely sure. And if you ever find yourself driving through Hocking Hills, if you see a sign for Whispering Pines Campground, keep driving. Don't stop, don't look back, and whatever you do, don't listen to the voices that call your name from the woods. Some hungers can never be satisfied. Some things that are lost should stay lost. And some love stories don't have happy endings. They just have endings.